These stories are first-hand accounts shared by Reddit users, detailing unsettling real-life encounters that left lasting impressions. Each narrative provides a chilling glimpse into moments of danger, survival, and eerie coincidences that might make you rethink your surroundings. Disclaimer: these accounts were originally published by Reddit users and are presented as personal experiences. While they are described as true events, their accuracy relies on the original storytellers. The details shared here are intended for awareness and cautionary purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised. Story 1. My brother's house is becoming overgrown with vines. My brother and my sister-in-law bought their first house recently. It's a nice little bungalow that they paid way too much for, but they're happy. Or at least, I think they're happy. I haven't seen or spoken to them in a long time. When they first started dating, I saw them together quite frequently, then they got engaged and I saw them together less. I did see them together on their wedding day, I guess, but it was only at the altar. They spent the rest of the day separate. It's usually my brother showing up alone to gatherings and parties. My sister-in-law always has something going on that prevents her from showing up. We all just assume she doesn't like us, and it's kind of made us all dislike her, too. My brother's frequent comments about her do not help. He doesn't seem to like anything about her, but somehow they stay together. I haven't really seen my sister-in-law since the holidays when she made a brief appearance at the family Christmas party and left 10 minutes in without so much as a wave goodbye. This is why I found it strange when I was invited to their house a few weeks ago to help my brother clear a tree that had fallen in their yard during a recent storm. I accepted and showed up bright and early with my chainsaw. My brother greeted me in the front yard and we barely spoke as we chopped up the tree and hauled it to the street. I couldn't help but notice there were an awful lot of vines growing up the side of the house. I mentioned it to my brother during one of our breaks, but he brushed it off. He said the Virginia creeper is just bad this year, he'd take care of it later. I shrugged and got back to work. After we finished the tree, I asked if there was anything else he needed help with. He said no and thanked me. We didn't speak for a week or so after that, but that was normal these days. I heard from my uncle that he had gone up there to help him paint his shed a few days after I had been there, and he mentioned the vines as well. He said the house was starting to look abandoned and that they really needed to take care of it before it became an issue. I told him I'd try to talk to him about it when I had the chance. I waited a few days and then tried to call him. It went to voicemail. I left him a quick message letting him know that I was just calling to talk with him about something and to call me back. I waited several hours and called again, going straight to voicemail. What a prick. Everyone in the family is expected to make time for him, but he can never do the same for us. Whatever, I'd just try him again the next morning. I tried for the next 3 days to get him to answer the phone. Leaving voicemails, texting, emailing, I was starting to get worried about him. I asked around and no one had heard from him in a week. Concerned that something might have happened to him, I decided to drive over to their house and check it out. He'd probably chew me out for invading their privacy, but I didn't care at this point. Something didn't feel right. When I pulled into their driveway, I saw both of their cars out front. I got out and started towards the house when I noticed the vines again. They really had gotten out of control. I'd never seen Virginia creeper this bad before. I walked up to their cars and peered in the windows to make sure they were empty. I put my hand on the roof of my brother's car and jerked it back when I touched something slimy. Wet vines were covering the top of the car. They had wound their way up from the tires to the doors and were now trying to weave their way in through the windows. Some had been successful and were slowly creeping down the crack of the door. How fast were these vines growing? I had just been there 2 weeks before and they weren't this bad. I shook my head and continued up the walkway to the front door. I knocked quietly and waited. Several minutes went by with no response, so I knocked louder. When I still didn't hear anything, I went around to look in the front windows, but the curtains were closed tight and I couldn't see inside. I tried the door handle and thankfully found it unlocked. I slowly leaned on the handle and found it difficult to push, like something thick was under the door. It took a lot of effort, but I finally managed to press it all the way in and saw what had been marring the way. The vines had infiltrated the inside of the house. If possible, they were worse inside than they were outside. Thin green tendrils were hanging from every corner and thick tangled cords covered the carpet. The entire room, floor to ceiling, was draped in green, leafy vines. They almost looked like they were pulsating and growing in front of my eyes, stretching to cover any bare space in the room. It would have been beautiful had it not been so terrifying. I tried to look for a source of the weeds that I could follow, but it was difficult to discern anything inside the sea of green. I picked up a particularly thick stem from the center of the room and followed it up the stairs. Each step was slick with vines and the leaves were covered in a sticky sap that stuck to my shoes. I had to crawl up slowly, trying to maintain my grasp. I finally reached the top and saw a faint light coming from my brother's bedroom. I tugged lightly on the vine in my hand and saw that it led to his doorway. I crawled on my hands and knees towards the door. The number of vines increasing as I got closer, they sagged out of the corners of the doorway and spread down the hallway in all directions. The upper floor was just as green as the living room had been. I could hear faint sounds coming from the bedroom. It sounded like laughter. I finally made it to the edge of the doorway and peered around the corner slowly. I looked inside and quickly snapped my head back into the hallway to keep from screaming. My sister-in-law was laying in bed, my brother kneeling on the floor beside her. But she wasn't normal. Her skin was a sickly yellow-green and her hair had turned into a thick moss that coated her scalp. Her arms and legs were long, thick versions of the vines that had taken over the house. Their bed had become a mound of vines that seemed to sprout from her body and fuse her in place. Little gnats and other flying bugs filled the room like a haze, sticking to their clothes and faces. In the midst of this horrific scene, my sister-in-law was laughing melodically, like she was her normal self and not some hideous plant creature. My brother smiled weakly beside her, not making eye contact. Thin stems were creeping around his neck and shoulders, winding their way around him in a restrictive loop. I wasn't sure what to do. I tried to back out of the hallway, but as soon as I touched the top of the staircase, my foot got hooked on one of the thicker vines. I slipped and stamped my foot down, causing a squeal of pain to fly out of the bedroom. I popped my head up to see my brother gaping at me. "What are you doing here?" He shouted at me, "Get out!" As soon as the words left his mouth, the vine I had stepped on came to life. It lifted itself heavily and snaked around my ankle. I turned and tried to crawl down the stairs, but the vine was too strong. I grabbed a picture frame that was peeking through the vines on the wall and stabbed a corner into the one that was tightening its grip on my leg. It let go as another scream erupted from the bedroom. This time it sounded angry. I raced down the stairs and ran out the door, not daring to look back until I was in my car and backing down the long driveway. The vines on the outside of the house seemed to be squirming and stretching towards me as I turned onto the street and sped home. I didn't hear from my brother for several days. I was sure he wasn't allowed to speak to me now that I saw what his wife had become. I heard snippets about them in passing from family members, but nothing out of the ordinary. They kept to themselves and everyone seemed to respect that. I seemed to be the only one that knew why they were being so secretive. I knew I had to rescue my brother, but how? I was sitting in my living room trying to come up with a plan when a letter was pushed through the mail slot in my door. The envelope was nondescript, but the return address was his. Confused, I quickly opened it up and pulled out a small, light green card. My breath caught in my throat when I saw the picture on the front. It was my brother and his wife, smiling happily, holding an ultrasound photo. Story 2. I bought a new washing machine. It kept taking longer. I'm now convinced I'll be dead in 3 days. After the divorce, all she left me was $13 and my dog, Kixie. I worked hard and finally found a livable apartment for $900 a month. It's got everything I need: a bedroom, a bathroom, and a kitchen. But best of all, a laundry room. I'm an introvert. I don't want to make small talk while my striped pajamas spin. Plus, I'm not about wasting 50 cents every time I need to wash my stained clothes. I managed to buy a pretty decent Indesit for $250. I decided to wash some bedding. Set it to bed and bath, 90 degrees, 1200 RPM, with an extra rinse. The LED showed 253. Sounds about right, I thought, checking the program list. When I saw the normal time was 241, I figured the extra rinse added the difference. I started it up at 1522 and took Kixie out for a walk. When I got back at 1603, the display still read 212. When it finished, I pulled the bedding from the drum, and one of the best smells I've ever known filled the room. Like the gods themselves had sprayed their perfume or something. I loved it. I cleaned the drum thoroughly and shut the door. I went to bed. When I woke up, I heard a very faint sound. Like, someone's talking? Shit, I thought. I went and looked at my clock. 3:23. I went through my apartment. When I walked past the machine, I swear it talked to me. Help. Me, I heard. I disconnected the machine and it stopped. Damn, must have been hallucinations, I murmured under my breath. I went to bed again and woke up at 6:03. I decided to do some laundry. I heard it humming when I connected the machine to the electricity, but not the pleas for help. Must have truly been sleep deprivation, I thought. I turned on some white clothes. Cottons, 40, extra rinse X2. 1400 RPM. Duration read, 3:01. Weird, in the program list it says it would take 1:59 with rinses. Well, I didn't care. I turned it on and went for some groceries after breakfast. I came home at 10:23 and it was still turning. It was on its final rinse. But it's been over 4 fucking hours? I went to bed. When I woke up, there was this faint sound, like someone was talking. Shit. I glanced at the clock, 3:23. Walking through my apartment, I passed the machine and I swear, it said, "Help me." I unplugged it and the sound stopped. Must have been hallucinations, I told myself. I went back to bed but woke up again at 6:03. I decided to do some laundry. When I plugged the machine back in, it hummed, but no cries for help this time. Must have just been sleep deprivation messing with me. I set it to wash some white clothes, cottons, 40 degrees, extra rinse twice, 1400 RPM. The display said 3:01. Weird, since the program list said 1:59 with rinses. I didn't care. I turned it on, then went for groceries after breakfast. Came back at 10:23. The machine was still running, stuck on the final rinse. For hours? What the fuck? After I turned it off, I tossed the load in the dryer. It was soaking wet. While turning the machine off, I accidentally brushed the program dial. It clicked. The machine lit up with all the settings active. It didn't start, but for a split second, the LED flickered. Die. What the actual fuck? I told myself I was seeing things. Stress, divorce, lack of sleep, whatever. I threw in a small load, just Kixie's dog bed. Set it to Cotton's Eco, 60 degrees, 1400 RPM, extra rinse. Because why the fuck not? Then it flickered again. You're dead. Blood red letters. That wasn't my imagination. I decided to call a mechanic the next morning. The display said 0:58. All right. Not too bad. I set it to delay start. Figured it would begin around 2:45 a.m. I thought maybe I could sleep through it. I woke up at 10:49. What I heard made my blood run cold. It was draining. Still, over 10 hours since it started. What the fuck? I jumped out of bed. The display read 0:46. I blinked. It changed. Look behind you. I turned around, and there he was. Kixie. Hanging. I dropped to my knees, untied the rope, tried to save him. But it was too late. Kixie was gone. I called the police immediately. They said it was a break-in. But nothing was stolen. Then, the washing machine spat something out. A note. You're next. Written in the dog's blood. I haven't been back to my apartment since. That was 2 days ago. Today, I heard a knock on the door. I'm at a friend's place. I locked the door, shoved a chair under the handle. It's quiet now. But he's in. I'm writing this from the basement. He's searching for me. If you can do anything, please help. Story 3. Something is slipping. Before I begin, I want to share, maybe a memory. Or maybe a lesson. Or maybe just something my brain stitched together out of scraps. When I was a kid, my father, the bastard that he was, once told me, fear is weakness. And weakness is something people use. I've interpreted it differently over the years. But lately, it started to mean something else entirely. My name is Derek. I'm 28. Freelance writer. Diagnosed schizophrenic. I moved into this apartment building a few weeks ago. Small place, mostly older tenants, quiet enough. Thought I'd give Reddit a shot. Writing helps sometimes. Reading too. See, when the voices start crowding in, those whispery little bastards with doubts and insults, it's like they hush up when I read. They lean in, like kids at a story time. Each shadow in the corner takes a line. Sometimes I even imagine the neurons in my brain flickering back to life as the narrative flows. That was my first week here. Peaceful. Familiar. But then things started shifting. I'm not saying it's real. I know what my diagnosis means. But I also know what I saw. Monday. Just got back from the hospital, picking up my meds. I tucked the Walgreens bag inside my jacket, discreet. No one needs to know. As I was unlocking my door, the one to my left creaked open. Ms. Grace. 80-something, soft-voiced, melting face. Skin like it was sliding off the bone, but maybe that's just how I see people sometimes. She gave me that smile, cherry red lips on sagging flesh, and that sweet southern drawl. Oh, there you are, my strong man. Could you help an old lady out? I nodded. Sure, Ms. Grace. What do you need? Just the trash. My hip's been actin' up since the surgery. Bless your heart. I asked, what about your grandson? I thought he was staying with you? Her smile dropped like a curtain. Her eyes lowered. The whites disappeared into the shadows under her brow. He's not here anymore. The silence after that felt suspended, like something waiting to fall. I nodded again. Like I understood. I didn't. Inside her apartment, all the lights were off except the hallway glow behind me. The place stank, like copper, rot, maybe ammonia. 3 oversized trash bags sat by the door, leaking something thick and dark. Mind the mess, she said, but the accent was gone. Her voice sounded wrong. I tried to breathe through my mouth as I grabbed the first bag. It was heavy. Too heavy. The voices in my head, usually cruel, dismissive, sounded different. Panicked. Pleading. Get out. She knows you know. We're exposed. You're helping her. Kept my head down. Hauled the bags out. Focused on the task. When I came back, her drawl had returned, smiling like nothing had changed. Thank you, sugar. I'll be sure to thank you properly, Tum-Tum. She patted my arm. Her skin felt cold. Dimples. I smiled back. Looking forward to it. I stepped inside my apartment, shut the door fast. But the feeling didn't leave. The voices were all screaming now, anger, confusion, fear. I reached into my jacket to take my meds. The bag was gone. Shit. Maybe I dropped it? Maybe I left it in Ms. Grace's place? I should have gone back. I asked. But when I peeked through the curtain, I could still see her silhouette through hers. Standing there. Motionless. When I opened the blinds, she was gone. Her door was closed. I almost let it go. I almost went to bed. But then I saw it. The Walgreens bag. Sitting on her windowsill. Folded. Upright. Mocking me. I didn't confront Ms. Grace that morning. Even though I needed those pills, something in me said not to bother her. Maybe I could get a refill. Maybe it wasn't worth it. Or maybe part of me just didn't want to find out what I might have seen. I stayed inside. Called Dr. Sharpen, my therapist, and told him about what happened. He listened, calm as ever, and explained it away. Said I was helping an elderly woman with chores, and that my condition may have distorted the details. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But even as I sat there, nodding on the phone, I could still feel the weight of those trash bags in my hands. Still smell that coppery, syrupy rot. I still hear her voice shift. By afternoon, I decided I'd face her. Just grab the Walgreens bag from her window and be done with it. I knocked on her door, just once. It creaked open before I could raise my hand again. I told myself that was good, less talking, no need to linger. I stepped in fast, eyes on the bag still sitting on her windowsill like it had never moved. Then I heard her voice from behind the door. Oh, you're back. I was just about to ask if you needed that little bag. I turned. She was hiding behind the open door, only half her face showing, one wide eye peeking out and a smile that didn't quite fit. Yeah, I started. I saw it yesterday, figured I dropped it, and the door was... She cut me off, her grin widening, too wide, her features warping like a painting in motion. You know it's rude to enter someone's home without being properly invited. Her tone was sweet, but something in it crawled up my spine. I'll keep that in mind, Miss Grace. Sorry, didn't mean to intrude. Sweat rolled down my back. My head was buzzing. Was it the lack of meds? Or something else entirely? Well, go ahead. Take them. I moved slowly to the window, every step feeling watched. I reached for the bag, trying not to look at her, but I could feel her gaze digging into my skin. We locked eyes as I slipped the bag into my jacket. I appreciate you being calm about this, I muttered. My voice shook. Sorry again. Was I scared? I couldn't let her see that. She smiled. But her eyes darkened, no whites, just pooling black, like tunnels looking straight through me. It's okay, she said softly. We all make mistakes, every now and then. Have a good night, Sonny. Sonny? That was her grandson, wasn't it? I didn't ask. I just nodded and backed out, then turned and bolted the second I hit the hallway. My feet ran before my thoughts could. Back in my apartment, I locked the door behind me and stood there. Frozen. The voices were louder now. She knows you saw. She's coming. You crossed the line. I tore open the bag and popped the pills, desperate for silence. But the paranoia didn't fade this time. It didn't feel like it was in my head. It felt around me, heavy, present, like something had come back with me. I must have blacked out. When I woke, I was on the floor, pills scattered like breadcrumbs, my heart pounding in my ears. But the voices were gone. That should have been a good sign. So why did I still feel like I wasn't alone? Wednesday, today was quiet. After cleaning up the mess from last night and organizing my pills, things felt still again. I even got back into my routine a bit. But I couldn't shake what happened with Miss Grace. Her voice. That door. That word, Sonny. I kept replaying Dr. Sharpen's voice in my head. It's all in your mind, Derek. Maybe he's right. Hell, maybe my parents were right too. They've been telling me for years to get a support animal. I've always brushed it off, but now, I don't know. My brain could use all the help it can get. So I started doing some research. I wasn't really expecting a discount or miracle price, but I figured, worst case, I could just adopt a dog from the shelter and train it myself. That's what I did. I walked down to one of the smaller, more overlooked shelters nearby. At first, I had my eye on a basset hound or a bloodhound, something with big ears and soulful eyes. But then I saw her. She stood out immediately. Massive. Silent. Unbothered. A black Tibetan mastiff, matted and unkempt, fur like tangled yarn or worn dreadlocks. She looked like a bear in hibernation. Still timeless. Something about her felt familiar. Like me, she didn't belong to the world around her. I adopted her on the spot, brought her home, gave her a bath, she barely reacted, and signed her up for those specialized therapy dog classes. She hasn't barked once. She just exists, moves only when she wants to. Sleep a lot. But when she lays by my feet, the chaos dims. I named her Cleo. There's something about her presence, anchoring. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone in the room. I mean, I've always been alone, but there's a difference between being alone and feeling it. I come from a big family. 8 of us, and somehow I was always the background noise. The second child. The quiet one. The one who made too much eye contact and too little conversation. Growing up in a house like that? Let's just say dysfunction was the wallpaper. I used to wonder why I wasn't close to anyone in my family. But now I realize, every time I reached out, they reminded me why I shouldn't. The same toxic patterns repeated, like a looped audio file with static in all the wrong places. And maybe my mind's not wired like theirs. I don't see things as they do. I think in parables, symbols, patterns. Not cause and effect. The point is, I know I'm crazy. Maybe lucid at times, maybe not. But that doesn't mean I deserve to be treated like a patient who's already failed treatment. Or a prisoner serving time for having a brain that bends a little differently. Reality doesn't crack because someone's weak. It breaks when it's twisted too many times. When words don't mean what they used to. When smiles are masks and no one explains the rules. My family was like a broken telephone game of telephone. After a while, I stopped playing. I started talking to myself instead. But clearly, even that has its consequences. Anyway, just rambling. I'm signing Cleo up for her first session tomorrow. She's asleep right now, curled up like a rug beside the door. I think she's already helping. Maybe tomorrow will be better. After our morning walk and finishing up Cleo's first specialized training session, not to mention a few errands, we finally headed back to the apartment. The instructor was kind. Helpful even. She complimented how well-mannered Cleo was, surprised by how naturally she followed cues. It's like she's done this before, she said with a smile and that classic Valley Girl accent. If she stares at what you're staring at, it's real. If she looks at you during an episode, then it's probably just in your head. I nodded. I know I should feel proud, but there was something about how cheerful she sounded that rubbed me the wrong way. I wanted to tell her to calm the hell down, but I just smiled and thanked her instead. I went ahead and signed Cleo up for 2 weeks of follow-up sessions, just to get her documented and official, I guess. I don't really care about the paperwork. I just like having her around. Someone who gets me. Even if that someone has pause. We hadn't seen Ms. Grace in 2 days. Probably for the best. After everything, I needed time to breathe. But then, the building started feeling off again. As Cleo and I walked down the hallway toward our place, I realized we were looping. Walking in circles. No door numbers. No signs. Nothing looked familiar anymore. Had I gone to the wrong floor? I turned around and headed back to the elevator. Pressed the button, up or down, I wasn't even sure. The doors opened and the display read, Floor 9. That can't be right. The building only has 4 floors. I live on the top, for F. I know this. I know this. Cleo noticed the shift in my mood. She looked at me with that grounding stare like she was waiting for me to recalibrate. I took a breath and pressed 4. The elevator opened again. Same hallway. But now there were no doors at all. Just a long corridor. Bare white walls. Paint peeling at the corners. No sound but the hum of dead air. I stood there, frozen. But Cleo wasn't. She pulled the leash forward, tugging me out of the elevator like she'd made the decision for both of us. The hallway felt sterile and wrong. Like the back of a corporate office they never finished. Cleo walked with a tired, deliberate pace, like this wasn't the first time she'd done this. Like she was already sick of my spiral. I hope you know what you're doing, I muttered to her. She stopped. Stared at the wall. Then looked back at me. Like she was expecting something. And then, without a sound, Ms. Grace appeared. I blinked and she was just there, standing in front of us like she'd stepped out of the wallpaper. Even Cleo jolted, her stance shifting into a guarded, alert posture. Jesus! I shouted, nearly swallowing my own heart. Ms. Grace just stood there, unfazed. Or worse, amused. Do you always use the Lord's name in that manner? She said, her tone playful, almost teasing. But something in her posture was wrong. Something leaned too far in. Cleo planted herself between us, eyes locked on Ms. Grace. Her face was neutral, but her tail stiffened. Those black, soulless eyes from before were gone. But the energy she gave off still stirred every voice in my head into a quiet scream. She knows you saw. She's hiding something. She's coming for you. That's a nice dog, she said, voice syrupy and slow. Is it a boy or girl? A she, I began. Does she bite? She interrupted, already reaching toward Cleo. That's when Cleo lost it. She barked, snarled, and lunged with a force I didn't know she had. If I wasn't 6 feet 0 inches and 225 pounds, she might have pulled me clean off my feet. See Cleo. Down girl. I yelled, straining to hold her back. Ms. Grace recoiled, but her face didn't match her voice. Her body flinched, but her expression didn't show fear. It showed a challenge. Like she'd been waiting for this. Goodness, get that thing under control, she snapped. But even then, her words felt rehearsed. Like a line she was reciting out of obligation. You know, she added, turning to go, you really shouldn't keep that thing in such a cramped apartment. Then she disappeared into her unit. Slammed the door. Cleo and I rushed back into ours. I pulled her inside and bolted the lock. She stood there for a long time, guarding the door, tail low, hackles slightly raised. She's never acted like that. Not with the trainer, the cashier, the people at the dog park. No one. Only Ms. Grace. She knows you know. She's coming for you, she always does. The voices whispered on loop, like a warning or a countdown. Cleo wouldn't leave the door. Just stood there, still, watching. It took forever to convince her to lie down. And when she finally did, it was right next to me. Pressed against my side like a shield. Am I making her as paranoid as me? Is there actually something going on? I took my meds. I tried to clear my head. I tried to focus. The voices are quieter now, but not gone. Writing this helps. A little. Like I'm debating with myself whether these things are real, or just in my head. Hell, maybe they're both. Tried it. I couldn't sleep last night. I think I woke up every 2 hours, sometimes gasping, sometimes drenched in sweat, sometimes unsure if I'd ever fallen asleep to begin with. Cleo stayed by me through most of it, her big body curled against my legs like a living anchor. But even she has limits. At some point, she rolled over with a soft grunt and gave me that look, the one that says, "Figure it out, man." By the first sign of daylight, I decided I'd had enough lying around. I needed to walk. To clear the static. To piece my head back together with fresh air. I ignored most of the calls on my phone, junk, family, some unknown number that kept calling around 3 a.m., but one voicemail stuck out. "Hello, Derek. I was calling to confirm your appointment tomorrow morning at 12:30. If you'd like to reschedule, that's fine, just return my call. Otherwise, I'll see you in my office at 12:30. And remember, take your medication. Dr. Sharpen." Of course. I forgot about that appointment. And I hadn't mentioned Cleo to him yet. I wasn't sure if he'd even approve. I couldn't just leave her here alone. Not after yesterday. Not after the elevator. Not after Ms. Grace. So I figured I'd take her with me. Simple enough. We left the apartment and headed down the hallway. That same hallway I've walked a dozen times now. The same peeling paint. The same faded carpet that smells like mold and copper and old soap. But today, it felt too calm. Have you ever felt that stillness? The kind that settles just before something terrible happens? That's what the air felt like in the building today. Like it was waiting. I closed my eyes just before we stepped outside. Just to breathe. Reset. Feel that first hit of crisp morning air and shake this crawling sense of pressure. But when I opened my eyes, we were back. Back on the 4th floor. Standing at the threshold of my apartment. I froze. Cleo looked up at me. Tilted her head. That grounding stare again, like she was checking me, like I was the one acting strange. Maybe I pressed the wrong elevator button? Maybe I walked back up out of habit? I tried again. Pushed the button. Elevator down. Lobby. Deep breath. Step out. Back on the 4th floor. Same place. Same spot. And again. I must have tried it 4 times. And every single time, we ended up right back where we started, at the threshold of my door. The hall swallowed me like a bad joke on repeat. Cleo started to sense something. Could tell. She sniffed the doorway, pawed at the edge like something was under it. She whimpered. That sound cut through me. She never whimpers. And then, she looked up at me. Which meant, it was in my head. Right? That's what the trainer said. If she looks at you, it's internal. But this time, her stare didn't feel like a correction. It felt like comfort. Reassurance. Pity? I closed the door and sat on the floor, dialing Dr. Sharpen's number. "Hey, I might have to reschedule our appointment," I said, trying to keep my voice level. Like I wasn't unraveling at the seams. "Okay," he replied. Too quick. Too neutral. "Is everything all right?" "Yeah. Just can't seem to get out of bed right now." I walked toward the kitchen while Cleo sat in the middle of the room, eyes still locked on the door. "You know, I could do a home visit," he offered, calm and precise. "If that's easier." "No, it's fine. I'm okay. I just need some rest." There was a pause. Long enough for the silence to feel loaded. "The pills aren't working, are they?" The voices began to hum, low at first, like static bleeding through my skull. Then clear. "He knows. They know. She's coming. Useless. Run. You said they take a few days to adjust, I muttered, trying to sound casual. My hands trembled as I gripped the countertop. The world felt uneven. That's true, he said. But now, his voice felt sharp. Like a scalpel. But if things worsen, you'll come to me. Yes. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I tried to answer, but my throat felt dry. Oh, of course, I finally said. I will. I hung up. I could have told him everything. Should have. But something inside me screamed not to. Like he was waiting for me to say the wrong thing. Like he wanted me to confess something I didn't understand yet. But what was I going to say? That I'm trapped inside a 4-story apartment building that somehow has a 9th floor? That I walk out the elevator only to reappear at my own front door? That my dog may be the only creature in the building who knows I'm not insane? I'd be institutionalized by morning. I'm a grown man. I should be able to handle my own mind. My own body. But every time I reach for the world outside, it swallows me whole and spits me back out in the same goddamn hallway. Maybe that's why I'm writing this. To trace a path. To figure out what's real. To prove I'm not just pacing a cage inside my own skull. Cleo and I stood at the threshold of the door again, staring at it like it might answer us. Might tell us what the hell we're supposed to do. And the voices, they didn't whisper anymore. They sang. The twisted, looping chorus. She's coming. Hide. She knows. She's coming. They coiled around my mind like vines. A macabre melody that warped my thoughts into grotesque shapes. Like static images glitching across a dying screen. I felt like a prisoner again. In my body. In this building. In my mind. Cleo missed her class today. We both did. And whatever's happening, it doesn't want me to leave. Or maybe it's me that doesn't want to. I don't even know anymore. I'm going to take my meds and try to sleep. I know I'm not crazy. I know I'm not. I couldn't sleep at all this weekend. Every time I closed my eyes, it felt like something just outside my awareness was whispering, crawling, waiting. Not a sound I could hear, more like a pressure behind my teeth. A thought that wasn't mine. I started drawing a map. Cleo has been helping me. She'd guide. Sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. You probably noticed I skipped Saturday. That was on purpose. And I have a completely rational explanation for it. I don't remember it. Not in the way people forget their keys or what they had for lunch. I mean nothing. Just a black hole where 24 hours used to be. And I know what you're thinking. Schizophrenia. Dissociation. Hallucination. Sleep deprivation. Sure. But I have proof. I've been keeping a notebook. Every hour. Writing what I see. What I hear. Even how many times Cleo blinks. And when I flipped back through my entries, Saturday is blank. Not skipped. Not torn out. Just never written. Like the day wrote itself and then deleted me from it. Anyway, it's Sunday now. And whatever this building is, it doesn't want me to leave. I've tried. Dozens of times. Elevators don't work. Stairs all lead to floor 4. Even the fire escape drops me at my own goddamn door like it's some kind of cosmic joke. So Cleo and I figured, fine. If we can't go down, let's go up. There's always a roof, right? Wrong. The top floor isn't a rooftop. It's a courtyard. Walled in with rusted iron fences and broken concrete planters. No sky. No sound. Just an empty pit pretending to be open air. And it gets worse. Every 5 floors, there's another courtyard. Same design, but older. More decayed. More off. As if the building keeps building on itself, but forgetting how it's supposed to look. The air changes too. At first, it was just cold. Then metallic. Then heavy. Like breathing through wet cloth soaked in vinegar and old pennies. I tried the basement. But you need the janitor's key, and I haven't seen that man in over a week. If he even exists. Cleo started growling at the stairwells. Refuses to go near them now. Like she knows they lead nowhere. I guess what I'm saying is, we're trapped. So now I'm mapping it. Floor by floor. Stair by stair. Hallway by hallway. Cleo stays close. She looks at me like I dragged her into hell, and maybe I did. But she's still here. Still following. I used to think it was just Miss Grace. That she was the root. The ghost. The parasite. But this place, this thing, it breathes. And now it knows that I know. It's like some unseen I finally blinked and noticed I was paying attention. Is this a test? A breakdown? Or have I finally caught up to reality? Either way, I've come full circle. I want to be back in my apartment. At least there, the madness was quieter. Contained. But now even that space feels smaller. It's like the further I travel into this building, the more it shrinks behind me. Like the walls contract every time I leave, trying to keep me from ever going back. Trying to force me forward. Cleo sees it too. I know she does. She's not looking at me anymore, she's looking at me. At the walls. In the shadows. At things I only catch from the corner of my vision. But then again, I am the one with the condition. So maybe I'm just projecting. Or maybe she's part of this too. Hell, maybe she's my mind trying to stabilize itself. A hallucination of a hallucination. I don't know. After that last phone call with Dr. Sharpen, I shut down completely. I turned my phone to airplane mode. I closed my laptop. No TV. No internet. No people. Just me. And Cleo. And this prison. But I need to document this. I need to write it down while I still remember the shape of my thoughts. Because something is happening. Something is building. If I disappear again, I want someone to know it wasn't because I gave up. It's because this place took me. So I begged. Chargers. Flashlight. Snacks. Batteries. Journal. Extra pens. Water. Cleo stood by the door while I loaded up my backpack like I was prepping for some backwoods hiking trip. She stared at the threshold. No fear now. Just readiness. Maybe I'm ridiculous. Maybe I'll spend the next 12 hours wandering hallways and end up right back in my bathtub muttering into a shampoo bottle. But if this is all in my head, then fine. Let me be the lunatic in tactical gear wandering his own hallucination. At least I'll know I tried. But if it's not, then I need to find whatever this is. Whatever is watching me. Cleo knew it too. She nudged the door. One slow breath. We stepped through together. Story 4. I barely survived. The alarm woke me shortly after the sunset and I pushed away the sleeping bag that covered my body, cautiously sitting up, reaching for the light to my left side. I wrapped my fingers around it and found the switch with my thumb. The camper lit up and I squinted, reaching for the hard case that contained my glasses, wiping them clean with the cloth I kept inside the case as well. I opened the canopy over the bed of my battered old 1984 truck. I stretched toward the sky and then stretched my legs as well, before walking into the building that housed the toilets. After relieving myself, I washed my hands and stepped back outside. I walked back to the truck and retrieved my pack of cigarettes and the vaporizer, taking a few hits off of the electronic device before tucking that into the key pocket of my jeans. I lit one of the little tobacco sticks and then opened the driver's side door of the truck and slipped behind the wheel, placing the key in the ignition, waiting for my phone to connect with the newer radio before backing out of the spot and leaving the rest area, turning right onto the highway. I continued on the lonely road into the mountains, both stubbing out the cigarette as I entered a series of tight curves that forced me to put both of my hands on the wheel. It took me another hour to reach a small town. I pulled onto the exit ramp, my stomach rumbling in protest to the fact I hadn't eaten anything since early afternoon the day before. I found a small restaurant with an equally tiny lot, though there were a few spots still open. I pulled into one of them and cut off the engine and stepped out of the old truck. I entered the building and was quickly shown to a table, the young server leaving a menu with me before moving away only to return with a cup for coffee and a little wire basket with creamer and sweetener packets in it along with a small glass shaker filled with real sugar. He returned again, a coffee pot in one hand, filling the ceramic cup while I browsed the breakfast dishes. It didn't take very long for me to decide on one of their breakfast sandwiches. The food didn't last much longer than the decision process had. I paid the bill and included a decent tip, making my way back out into the lot, taking a few moments to walk a few laps around the blacktop, stretching my back again as well, and once I had limbered up a little I got back into the truck and continued out onto the road again, heading westward through the mountains toward the valley where I had been born. I had been traveling for months and was daydreaming of spending time in a comfortable bed instead of the thin foam rubber pad I was using as a mattress as I pressed the brake, approaching another series of curves. My engine roared as I pressed the accelerator, urging the rusty old truck up an incline, lighting another cigarette, rolling down the window to let the smoke escape into the air outside. I drove until the sun began to set, and as my eyes began to close of their own accord, I cranked up the radio, keeping myself awake until I saw a billboard advertising a motel 20 miles away. I pushed the pedal toward the floorboard again and lit a cigarette. I had to slam on the brakes when a deer ran in front of me, my heart hammering in my chest as I swerved over the center line and back into my lane. There was no impact, but the adrenaline dump was making my hands shake as I pulled to the side of the road. I didn't kill the engine but sat there until the trembling in my fingers eventually stopped. I started to pull back onto the road but waited as a log truck rolled by. I waited, allowing it to get a decent head start on me before I entered the curves behind it. The moon was barely visible through the clouds and the thick canopy only made it harder to see. I turned on the lights just in time to swerve again to avoid the jackknifed truck sitting sideways in the road. The hazard lights were flashing and the little orange triangles were already out as well, the lights on the trailer and coming from the cab casting everything in a strange yellow hue as I pulled over once again, pressing the button that activated my own hazard lights, then shifted the old truck into park. I reached under the seat to grab the large, metal flashlight from underneath where it was strapped next to my first aid kit. I tested the heavy torch, flicking the switch forward, and the bulb came to life as I had expected. I stepped out, glancing around, and straining to hear just in case the driver was hurt. Nothing but the sounds of insects and other forest animals filled my ears, the buzzing of wings and the chirping song of crickets interlaced with the croaking of tree frogs and hooting of owls. "Hello!" I called out, sweeping my light over the asphalt, the glimmer of broken glass reflecting back to me. The only response I got was the normal noises along with the quiet ticking of the truck behind me as the engine started to cool. I felt a moment of fear, but became convinced that the other driver was hurt and couldn't answer, so I did the only thing I could think of. I approached the truck, halting when I saw the state of the driver's side door. The thing looked mangled as I moved my light over it, bent and dented, small punctures in the paint and metal. They looked almost like bullet holes, but that made no sense. There hadn't been enough time, and besides, no small caliber firearm had left some of those dents. I could smell something in the air. Familiar, but I couldn't place it until I saw the blood smeared and pooled in the seat. I realized what that was. Iron. I retched and stepped back, and for a moment the thought of getting the hell out of there crossed my mind, and in retrospect, I should have. Instead I moved around to the front of the tractor trailer where I saw more gore and clear impact damage. The grill of the semi-truck was nearly concave. I swept the beam of my light back and forth across the wrecked vehicle. The sound of a branch snapping behind me had me spinning around, heart leaping into my chest initially, breath freezing in my lungs. I felt a little silly when a buck poked its head out from behind the small shrub that still hid its body from my view. I began to relax, and the animal stepped out further, and I trained the flashlight on the chest of the creature. It looked to be smeared with mud or something. As the thing stepped forward again, I realized exactly what it was. Blood. Fear returned in a big way as the thing approached more, clearly not spooked by me at all. I started to backtrack, and the thing continued to approach me. I didn't want to turn my back, but if I didn't, it was going to catch up to me for sure, or I was going to trip. I turned and began to run toward my truck, and thankfully made it before the buck behind me caught up, but not fast enough to get to me before I slammed the door. I was quickly shown how wrong I was even as the thought that I was safe began to form in my mind. The thing rammed the door hard, and it dented but didn't buckle. I started to turn the keys. The thing that looked like a buck rammed those antlers into the tire, which exploded with a loud pop. I wouldn't be going anywhere. The thing stared at me through the window of the truck after puncturing my tire, and I got the feeling it was taunting me. When it started ramming the door again, I regained the ability to move and started scooting across the seat toward the passenger side of the truck. I mentally counted down from 3 to 0 as I scooted toward my exit, clutching the flashlight in one hand and the handle to the door in the other. I pushed hard and hit the ground running. The thing let out a noise that sounded like a bellow mixed with a grunt, but not entirely animal. There was something wrong with the vocalization. I began to run, blindly at first, into the trees, briars and other thorny shrubs tearing at my clothes and bare arms. I didn't stop, hearing the heavy hoof beats of my pursuer. Every time I turned, it would move to one side or the other, as if it were hurting me somewhere. As I ran, I tripped over something and sprawled to the ground. I lost my grip on the flashlight and it swept around in a half-arc to shine behind me. I glanced toward what had entangled my ankle and caused me to fall. I wish I hadn't. I saw a disembodied arm and roughly a quarter of a torso. Ragged clothing clung to the ragged flesh, dried blood darkening the edges of the fabric where it had been shredded at the same time. I let out a cry before I could restrain myself. It wasn't as if I had escaped. I could hear that thing getting closer even as I struggled to my feet. Any head start I had gotten had been negated by the fall, and by the time I was running again, that buck, or whatever was chasing me, was closing in with every step. I was wearing down, but that thing didn't seem to be getting tired at all. That thought was followed by the feeling of antlers jabbing painfully into my lower back, pushing me forward. I stumbled and tried to maintain my balance, and while I stumbled, the animal headbutted me again. This time when I sprawled out, the flashlight flew from my hand. I rolled onto my back instinctively as the creature moved to stand over me, and in that moment, I did the only thing I could think of. I made a fist and swung upward, my knuckles finding nothing but open air as it ducked backward. Even though my attack failed, it gave me the opportunity to scramble backward again, away from the beast. Its jaws parted and it let out another bellow, this one sending a chill straight to my bones. I managed to get to my feet as it took a step back and scraped at the ground with one of its front hooves, and that sound seemed off somehow as well. Like bone on bone. I backed away slowly, not turning my back on the thing as it advanced toward me. I wasn't going to escape this way, having to carefully measure each backward step, but at least I would be able to see if the thing prepared to attack me again. I still wasn't fast enough to dodge when it did charge, closing the distance and lowering its skull almost impossibly fast. I felt the sharp pain under my ribs before I registered what was happening, body losing purchase with the earth, arcing upward before landing in a thorny bush. I didn't have time to feel the pain, forcing myself to move even though simply breathing was painful. A beam of light caught my eye from the periphery of my vision. My flashlight. I scrambled toward it just as the thing that looked like a deer charged me again. This time its jaw opened and clamped down around the lower part of my leg. I let out another scream as the pressure increased, and I literally heard my shin bone crack in the thing's mouth. I screamed out again and barely managed not to pass out from the pain. I kicked at the deer's skull, heel connecting solidly with the top of his head over and over again until it released my leg. I scrambled away and started moving again, trying to push myself backward. My ribs were definitely cracked as well, and I barely got myself free from the tangle of branches that ripped at my skin before the thing closed in on me once more. I kicked desperately with my good leg while using my arms to continue scooting backward. "Leave me alone," I yelled, knowing that it was pointless, and even speaking made pain flare through my torso. "Hello?" came an incredulous voice in the distance. "Help!" I cried, just a moment before the deer thing bit down on my already injured leg again. This time its blunt teeth closed around my knee joint, but before it could do too much damage, I heard the sound of a gunshot. The bullet whizzed past the thing, but that was enough to cause it to halt its attack on me. A beam of light focused on the blood-soaked animal, and there was another shot. It jerked to the side as the wet sound of the impact reached my ears, sending a spray of blood into the air that filled the area with a foul odor. The thing looked down at me, and then toward the direction the attack had come from, seemingly barely affected by being shot. My bleary eyes turned in that direction as well as the person with the rifle advanced. The creature gave a sickening bellow and then bounded off into the forest. The man with the light and firearm approached me, and I almost broke down in tears out of sheer relief. The man knelt next to me and tried to help me stand, but after a few moments, realized that wasn't going to work. He lifted me and carried me about 50 yards back toward the road, then set me down. "I'll be right back." "I don't think it followed us," the older man said, then jogged down the slight slope and out of sight, his flashlight beam bobbing into nothingness. I barely clung to consciousness long enough to hear the siren of an ambulance wailing in the near distance. I blacked out only to wake up a few minutes later when the stretcher was loaded into the back of the truck, the transfer too painful to ignore even being in shock as I was. The paramedics questioned me, but I don't remember what I told them, to be honest. I knew they wouldn't believe the truth. I don't know what that thing was, but I don't drive alone anymore. Story 5. There's a stranger living in my photos. I was cleaning out my phone last week, deleting junk to make room for a system update. You know how it is. Random memes, screenshots from months ago, blurry photos you forgot to delete. I got to this burst photo set I took during a solo hike back in May. I almost skipped past it, but something caught my eye. The first image looked totally normal. I was standing on a rock outcrop, holding up a peace sign with the woods stretching behind me. It was one of those automatic burst shots where the camera takes a bunch of photos in a row to catch movement. I figured I'd pick the best frame and delete the rest. The second photo was off. My pose hadn't changed, but there was a weird blur in the trees. At first I thought it was just motion blur or a trick of the light. But in the third frame, it wasn't a blur anymore. It looked like a face, pale and long, barely visible behind a tree about 30 feet back. The eyes were open, too wide, and the mouth was slightly parted like it was mid-breath. I stared at it for a while, thinking maybe I was just seeing a pattern in the bark or a trick of shadow. In the fourth and fifth images, it was closer. Still partially behind trees, but definitely there. You could see the outline of shoulders now. The head tilted slightly, like it was watching me or listening. By the seventh photo, it was maybe 10 feet behind me. And I swear I could see fingernails peeking from around the edge of a tree, like it was just barely holding back from stepping out. The final shot in the burst, the eighth photo, made my stomach drop. The figure was directly behind me, less than a foot away. I didn't feel anything when I took the photo. No footsteps, no breathing, no sense that someone was behind me. But in the picture, it was there, clear as day. The same pale face, eyes wide and unblinking, mouth now shut completely. I started freaking out. I scrolled back and forth through the burst set, thinking maybe it was an app glitch, maybe some AI had accidentally edited it, or maybe I had downloaded something cursed. But I checked the metadata out of curiosity. Each photo was time-stamped 6 minutes apart. But I only remembered taking one photo. One burst. One click. My first thought was that maybe the camera bugged and spaced them out. My second thought was that someone was messing with me. I showed the photos to my roommate. At first, he laughed it off, said it was probably some built-in photo effect or some weird double exposure trick. I asked him to try taking a test burst on his phone to see if we could replicate the timing glitch. So we went outside. He took a few bursts of me standing in our driveway, joking the whole time. 10 minutes later, we looked through his gallery. The last frame of the final burst made him stop laughing immediately. That same pale face. Behind him. Closer this time. We left the house that night. Booked a hotel. We told the landlord there was a break-in, but didn't give details. I wanted to throw my phone in the trash, but something told me that wouldn't help. The real reason I'm writing this now is because it's getting worse. My phone started saving photos I didn't take. Random ones. Empty rooms. My closet. My bed while I sleep. Sometimes the images are pitch black, sometimes there's a faint white smudge in the corner. And in the last one I found, taken at 3:12 a.m. last night, I'm asleep in bed. But I'm not alone. There's a face in the mirror across from me. Smiling. And this time I can see its teeth. Story 6. I used to prefer the night shift as a bus driver. The lights of the bus hum faintly, casting an eerie glow over the empty seats. It's just past midnight, and I'm nearing the end of my shift. My eyes ache from hours of staring through the windshield, navigating the same route I've driven for years. I'm ready to call it a night, park this beast, sink into a bar stool, and let a cold beer drown the night. I spot a lone figure standing at the next stop, hunched under the dim streetlights. I ease the bus to a halt, the doors hissing open. He steps aboard. He's a tall, lanky man dragging a large suitcase behind him. The thing is bulky, scuffed, and heavy-looking, like it's packed with bricks. He's wearing a ragged surgical mask, probably had it since COVID. It was pulled tight over his face. It obscures everything but his eyes, which dart nervously, avoiding mine. I offer my usual evening, but he mumbles something incoherent, a low, garbled sound that sounded like it came from a bad dream. He shoves a crumpled bill into the fare box and lurches toward the back, the suitcase scraping along the floor. I glance at him in the overhead mirror as I pull away. He's sitting alone, slouched, one hand resting on the suitcase like it's a pet. Something about him sets my nerves on edge, but I shake it off. Just another late-night passenger. This city's a zoo at this hour, and I've seen every kind of animal. A few stops later, he stands abruptly, shuffling his feet to the rear door. He doesn't look back, doesn't say a word, just stumbles off into the dark. The doors close, and I'm alone again, the bus rumbling toward the end of the route. My shoulders loosen a bit. Almost done. I pull into the depot, the lot quiet except for the steady hum of the other buses idling in the fuel line. I grab my clipboard and start my post-trip inspection. Gotta make sure no one's passed out in the back or left their phone under a seat. I move down the aisle, scanning the rows. Nothing out of place. No forgotten umbrellas, no sleeping drunks. Then I see it. The suitcase. Tucked under the seat where the masked guy was sitting. My stomach twists. People forget things all the time. I'm always turning in lost wallets, bags, hats. But this thing? It's too big, too bulky to be simply forgotten. I step closer, crouching to get a better look. The suitcase is old, canvas fraying at the edges, with a zipper that looks rusted. And then I notice it, a dark, wet stain spreading across the floor beneath it. My breath catches. I notice the air smells faintly metallic, like copper. I kneel down next to it, my heart thumping louder than it should. The stain glistens in the dim light, and I lean closer, squinting. It's not coffee or soda. It's liquid. Blood. A cold sweat prickles my skin. My hand hovers over the suitcase, trembling. I should just call it in, let someone else deal with this, I think to myself. But my fingers brush the zipper, and some stupid part of me needs to know. The zipper sticks at first, like it's fighting to keep its secrets. The zipper finally gives way, and the suitcase flops open. Inside, packed tight, are pieces. Human pieces. Arms, legs, a torso, chopped up like meat in a butcher's shop. The flesh is pale, slick with blood, and a hand sits on top, fingers curled like they were searching for a way out. My stomach lurches, and I stumble back, my boots slipping in the pooling blood. I can't look away. The horror's too real. That masked man's garbled voice echoes in my skull, low and twisted. Who is this poor soul? And who was he? This city has her secrets, and I feel like I just unzipped one that didn't want to be told. Story 7. I witnessed the strangest apocalypse. Nobody else seems to remember. I saw the end of the world, and its harbinger, from the top of a mountain. It's possible that nobody else had as good a view as I did, but even if I wanted to find out, I can't. Nobody I've asked has corroborated my story. Most just laugh and go along with my excuse that I'm writing a horror book and want to interview random people about the area. A rare 2 or 3 have gotten a faraway look in their eyes before shaking their head and refusing to talk about it further. That look both scares and comforts me. After a few dozen interviews with an equal amount of coffee and beer to help bribe a story from the interviewee, I'm noticing that 1,000-yard stares more and more often. A part of me had hoped that I'd gone through the most vivid nightmare ever experienced. That hope gets smaller and smaller the more often I ask someone about the black skies, the red rain, and the yellow eyes. The last person I interviewed went pale and nauseous after I asked if she remembered anything about that week. Before I could make sure she was okay, she ran off into a nearby park sobbing and telling me to stay the hell away from her. It might have been creepy behavior, especially for a girl that had just been interviewing her, but I sat at the coffee shop for hours until I saw her come out of the park and drive away in her car. Her makeup had smeared all over her face, her jeans and jacket covered in dirt and grass stains. That was a week ago. It was the last time I doubted that the apocalypse I'd witnessed had happened. The interview stopped, but that burning desire to learn either if or what anyone else has seen led me here. I want to tell my story and see who else has remembered. Hopefully I can jog your memory. I'll pray that the memories aren't as horrifying as mine or that woman who ran off into a park for hours. Am a security guard for a mining company that owns the mountains near my apartment complex. Like most security guards, I signed onto the job for the amazing work-to-pay ratio. Half of my shift was doing patrols while listening to audiobooks, the other half keeping half an eye on security cameras posted around the mountain while I played video games. Every now and then I'd have to turn away hikers and check the radio towers near my station, which was what the security company was really paying me for. The first rumble came during lunchtime. I was in my building, a concrete little thing I called my hut, looking at the security cameras and eating an egg salad sandwich when my cup of coffee started to vibrate every few seconds. Nothing to worry about. Earthquakes happen around the valley pretty often, sometimes as often as 6 in 1 month. The worrying started when the shaking grew more intense yet happened at the same rate. Put another way, earthquakes usually didn't have a pace like footsteps. It's what makes that one scene from that dinosaur movie so memorable. The shaking got more intense. Thick binders containing company SOPs started bouncing off of shelves. Monitors were shaken from their stands and crashed to the ground. My coffee cup bounced off of the table and spilled onto the ground. I didn't even notice. I had my head in my hands, curled up into a corner and praying that whatever was happening would just stop. Something screamed. I wish I could say it had been myself, but there was a distant, screeching trumpeting that overpowered any shouting I could have done. A switch flipped in my head, and I needed to see what the hell was happening outside of my building. My balance was hard to maintain, but I managed to time it well with the shakes that were now shaking everything so much that a view of the entire planet splitting and shaking open was what I'd assumed would be outside of my hut's window. But I had to see. If the world was about to end in a fiery explosion, I wanted to see it go. Better that than crying in a cement corner and getting concussions from my head knocking against the walls. Fumbling, but somewhat stable, I made it to the window that overlooked the north side of the mountains. Something was crossing the sky. It was higher than the highest clouds, at least 4 or 5 miles in the air, but probably much taller than that. A black, writhing thing that stretched from horizon to horizon, caging the entire sky and casting a pitch-black eclipse in a wave across the valley. There were only a few moments to take the sight in before a leg rather, crashed into the middle of the valley. The impact threw me around the room like a rag doll. After landing, I stayed there on the floor and waited. My ability to think was gone at this point. There was only a raw fear while the shaking continued. One more shake that was as powerful as the last. Then another weaker one. They'd started to subside, continuing off towards the south until the room was shaking just enough to make tiny waves in the pool of coffee on the floor next to me. I don't remember how long I laid there on the floor, only that I got up after the coffee started soaking into my clothes. At one point I thought I heard a low thrumming as the emergency generator below the station kicked into gear. My body was sore and it hurt to move, but nothing was broken. Or at least, when I finally sat up and looked at what was left of my hut, broken bones weren't stabbing any of my innards. A part of my psyche realized I was technically still at work and took over. As far as that part of my brain was aware, the room was a mess and my lead would kill me when she got there for her shift. One of the radios on the charging dock was still in its socket. I took it out and thumbed the talk button on the side. "Hey, Maze." Maze was short for Maisie, my supervisor that had a trailer-turned office at the bottom of the mountain. No response. "Maze? Maze? Please respond. I need help." I let go of the talk button for a response. None came. "Maze? Maze? Please tell me you're there. All of the monitors are broken on the floor. I feel like my whole body is bruised, and all of the paperwork is soaking in a puddle of coffee. What do I do?" No answer but a slight echo from my shouting off of the concrete walls. I was really starting to notice the silence when a few pitter-patters came from the roof. "At least it's not raining," I cursed as I walked to the window, radio still in hand. "Maze, can you?" The window was dark. Pitch black. A short time ago I could see an entire valley below a bright blue summer sky. I imagined, just for a second, that my hut had been sunken into the ground or somehow put into some void that I'd never escape from. A roar came from behind me and far overhead. The sound crested my mountain, and with it a green light that flowed along the sky the same direction as the sound, north to south. I could see the valley for a few seconds as the dim light crept south, a portion of it funneling into what I'd seen crash into the middle of the valley. I referred to it as a leg before, and even now I think that's the most accurate term for it. The thing had bent and pushed into the ground while I saw it. Chills went down my arms when I saw, in the brief seconds the light went through it, just how big the leg was. Not width-wise, but length. It made my head spin even trying to judge the size. Even at the time I was certain that it was connected to whatever was in the sky. After the light went into the leg and beyond the southern horizon, the valley started to light up too. Not much of it though. Whatever that pillar was, it must have knocked out all of the electricity in the valley. I listened, terrified, while the rainfall got heavier and small blue lights began popping on all over the valley. A lot of electronics can survive an electromagnetic pulse if their circuitry and parts are simple enough, including a lot of flashlights and even some cars, which I just assumed the lights were. It might sound odd to bring it up right now, but I want you to consider something I heard referred to as the terminal freakout point. At what point when shit starts to go down do you start to panic? Everyone has one, even the most carefully planned and prepared apocalypse preppers you've heard about online. It took 3 things happening in quick succession for me to reach my own terminal freakout point. The first was realizing that the red haze in front of the lights down in the valley was the rain itself. The rain was thick and red. Mist formed along the bottom of the valley that made any attempts at clearly watching what was happening close to impossible. Second was the things that came out of the sky. Even now, sitting here in a library at a public computer, people are giving me looks as my teeth chatter and my legs start to shake. But I'll push through. They didn't fall out of the sky, per se, rather they hung from it. That black sky which was so far above our own was partially illuminated by a litany of yellow orbs that descended from whatever had swallowed the valley, maybe even the world, up in darkness. Whatever encompassed us, the yellow lights illuminated a billowing, black cloud that seemed to undulate at a fixed height in the sky. The closer the bright yellow lights got to the ground, the more their light refracted into the rain and mist dropping into the valley. It would have been an unfathomable mercy if this hadn't been the case, but it illuminated whatever they were. I still don't know, but whenever I bring this up to people I interview, this is always the part where they get uncomfortable. Their subconscious must remember what the things looked like, as I do, and very clearly at that. Heads. Huge, black heads with glowing yellow eyes that shone like spotlights. Most were human, some were animals like cats, dogs, or horses. At a few points, when I was still in enough shock to keep staring at them, I saw the heads of insects with dozens and dozens of glowing eyes. They all descended and screamed. The screams didn't have any sound to them, but the expressions of agony on each of the faces were quite clear. When they were done screaming, they ascended back into the sky to be replaced by another. The valley was awash in yellow lights, red rain, and red mist. I still wasn't at my terminal freakout point. Hanging off of the edge, sure, but I was struck stupid with fear and confusion at what I was seeing. I wasn't pushed off the edge until I did start to hear screaming. All at once, I heard an entire valley of people scream. I'm actually not sure if this is real or not. It's a real possibility that it was a nightmare that I had while I holed up in my hut for the next week, but I think it was real. I prayed to God, literally, that my mind doesn't have the imagination to think of a sound like what I heard. Millions of wails of despair from a valley of people reaching the terminal freakout point. It formed a choir that I'm sure mimicked the deepest bowels of torment in hell. I screamed too. Screamed until I tasted blood. After that point, my memory gets a bit fuzzy. What I do remember is pulling my window curtains shut and never looking out of them again. My concrete hut became my home, which I left only when I needed to go to the bathroom outside under an umbrella. It was horribly uncomfortable, but I made it work. There were emergency rations and snacks, enough for 3 days. I dragged it out for a week. After 5 days my stomach was making weird gurgling noises while pain racked my entire body, like my insides were tearing themselves up. There's not a doubt in my mind that if I hadn't had the emergency lights, a few paperbacks in my bag, and a few cases of water, I would have gladly thrown myself off of one of the mountain's steep cliffs. I'm actually not sure if that's the truth or not. I hope it is. Besides my books, all my existence really was for a week was the countdown. That initial wave of green that went across the sky and into the pillar repeated itself. Every time it did, I heard screams come from the skies that made my ears ring even when I stuck my fingers in them. The intervals between each of the waves got shorter and shorter over time. At one point I was bored enough to do the math with a pencil and notebook, or at least the best math I could, to see when there wouldn't be any more breaks between the waves of green light and screams. A week. Whatever else was going to happen in this nightmare, it would be in a week. I waited. Besides dying, which was still more scary to me than what was going on outside, there was nothing else to do. At the end, I was so delirious from the constant screaming in the air, mostly from the sky, occasionally from the valley, the hunger, and the time that was impossible to keep track of in my hut, that I crawled out into the rain to see the end for myself. Even thinking about walking made me nauseous. The final vivid memory I have of the apocalypse started with me dragging myself to the edge of the concrete platform my hut was on and looking out to a destroyed and emaciated valley. There wasn't much time to get a good look, not that I could have gotten one through the red mist, but I did see that there were still some lights bouncing around the buildings. A few of the skyscrapers in the downtown area across from my mountain were burned to a crisp, and I swear I could see a party of some kind going on the rooftop of the tallest one. An insane sight, but I can't throw any stones. I was there to watch too. And I did watch. The waves of green light and screaming heads in the obsidian sky increased to such a frequency that I'm pretty sure I felt my ears give out to a painful whining sound. The last thing I saw was another head descending from the sky. At that point the heads and the black, inky ceiling were a constant green that exaggerated the glowing eyes. I'm not completely sure, but I think that last head I saw was mine. We matched perfectly, both screaming in a mix of defiance and subservience at whatever was coming. Then there's a flash. In my memory, it's yellow. My screams were echoing off of my apartment walls. I was in bed, just as I had been the day it had all started. It took some time for me to calm down and remember what a healthy body felt like to move around in while I ate so much that I puked. Despite what I said earlier, I admit that I've never thought it was a dream. I wouldn't have tried interviewing anyone if that were true. I'd guess that deep down I still hold some hope that what I saw didn't happen, even though I know it did. While I've taken breaks from writing this for you, I've noticed fewer people out on the streets. I'm downtown now, and even during times of low traffic you used to be able to see at least a dozen people walking wherever, plus the constant flow of public transport. There were still plenty of people going about their business when I first woke up, much to my shock. On my way around the block to stretch my legs just now, I saw one person on the street. It was a woman in a business suit, a laptop case hanging from one of her hands. She was in the middle of the sidewalk, looking up at the sky. I think she looked scared. I think people are starting to remember. That scares me almost as much as the apocalypse did because, being as objective as I can about what I experienced, my situation was somewhat of a best-case scenario. I had a building with lights, books, food, and water all to myself. What could it have been like on the ground level, with millions of people in a compact area? What about the rest of the world? I hope other people reading this also remember what happened. If you do, let me know. I get the feeling that we're going to reach a second terminal freakout point when everybody else starts to remember. Story 8. There's a reason the forest behind our house is fenced off. I wish I'd listened. When my wife Sarah and I bought the house, it felt like a dream come true. Quiet neighborhood, plenty of trees, and a big backyard with a rusted, overgrown fence running along the far edge. The realtor said the forest behind it was undeveloped county land. No trails, no utilities, no trespassing. She mentioned the fence was probably an old property divider. But it wasn't just a fence. It was nearly 8 feet tall, made of rusted iron with twisted, sharp points along the top, like it was built to keep something in, not out. Right in the center, hidden behind vines and moss, was a gate, welded shut with thick seams of metal and rust. On the inside of that gate, our side, someone had carved a single word into the metal. Stay. At first, we thought it was some strange leftover from the previous owners. Maybe they were paranoid. Maybe they had kids and wanted to scare them from wandering into the woods. Now I think they were trying to warn us. The dog noticed it first. Bear is usually friendly, dumb as a rock but loyal. After we moved in, he refused to go near the fence. Wouldn't even step into the backyard. He'd stand at the sliding door, growling softly, tail low, ears pinned. Then the dreams started. Sarah said she kept dreaming about the woods, dense, black trees packed tighter than they should be. She said she heard things walking just out of sight, shapes moving between the trunks. I shrugged it off, told her it was stressful. New house, new environment. Normal adjustment stuff. Then I started having the same dreams. And then it got worse. One night last week, I woke up at exactly 3:17 a.m. Not from a noise. Not from a nightmare. I just knew I had to wake up. The house was silent. Even Bear wasn't snoring. I got up and looked out the back window. There, standing inside the fence. On the other side of the welded gate. I couldn't see much, just a tall silhouette. Pale, almost white. Barely human-shaped. It didn't move. Didn't run when I turned on the porch light. It just raised a long, thin arm and pointed at me. I blinked. It was gone. The next morning, I found Bear footprints in the dew. Human-looking but wrong. Toes too long. Arches too low. They led from the gate, across the backyard, and stopped right beneath our bedroom window. That night, Sarah said I was talking in my sleep. Not mumbling, whispering. She said I kept repeating the same phrase over and over. Let me back in. I remember now. Let me back in. I don't remember any of it. But she swears she saw me get up around 2 a.m., unlock the back door, and stand by the fence. Just staring. She said I whispered something to the gate. And something whispered back. Last night was the worst. I woke to Sarah shaking me, tears in her eyes. The gate, she said. Listen. I held my breath. In the silence, I heard it. Metal groaning. A slow, dragging, shrieking noise, rusted hinges straining. We ran to the window. The gate was open. Bent inward, like something had forced its way through the welds. I grabbed a flashlight and went out barefoot, heart pounding. The air near the gate was colder. Still, like the woods themselves were watching. And that's when I saw it. The word on the gate's stay was gone. Scratched over with deep, jagged gouges. Now it said, "Welcome home." I don't know what I did. I don't know what's calling to me from those woods. But something is. Something that remembers me. I think I'm starting to remember it too. Story, mine. Something keeps coming through my window at night. Does anybody know of some really good locks for windows? Because I've got a problem, to say the least. Moving out into this complete and utter devoidness of civilization might end up being my biggest mistake ever, and that's saying a lot. I've made a mess out of a lot of things in my life, but I didn't think I could fuck up simply finding a new place to live, at least not this badly. Hell, I think sleeping in my car under an overpass next to sewage and bums would have been preferable to this absolute violation of both my privacy and my sanity. Alright, I'll quit being vague and get right to the point. As much as it disgusts me to even think about, something keeps coming through my window at night, and I don't know how to stop it. I first started noticing about a month after moving here, though looking back now there were signs I should have caught onto since day one. Here, being a small, secluded cabin halfway up a mountain with the nearest town 50 miles away, and the word town is doing a lot of heavy lifting. It was a cheap, remote location, which is exactly what I needed after what happened near my last home. I don't want to get into it right now, but let's just say it was messy. Look, I know how it sounds, but I'm not trying to run away from anything. I just wasn't exactly eager to stick around and needed a place to clear my head. We all need that once in a while, right? Well, I didn't find that here. In fact, my thoughts are cloudier than ever, and I have a terrible feeling that a hurricane is coming. That's why I need your help. See, what I started noticing after living here for a month is that for some reason, the bedroom window right above my bed just would not stay shut while I slept. The first few weeks I had been keeping it open anyway, as this place has no central air and it gets extremely humid very quickly in this wooden hotbox. Then I would wake up almost entirely drenched most mornings, and figured it was just raining throughout the night and getting all over me in the process. Now I'm not so sure that it was raining. So I resigned myself to being slightly less soaked when I woke up, closing the window at night and deigning to drown in sweat instead of polluted rainwater. However, that didn't seem to change anything. The first few mornings afterwards I would awaken to that damnable dampness yet again, and curse myself for apparently forgetting to close the window before falling asleep. After all, it was still open every time I looked back up to check. I soon realized it wasn't as basic as a bad memory. Setting an alarm right before bed to remind me, I made sure I was shutting the window every night, right before crashing face first into my pillow and giving myself over to the sweet embrace of unconsciousness. But without fail, I would wake up wet, angry, and increasingly worried about the still wide-open window above my resting place. Was I sleepwalking, and determined to let my house flood eventually? That made at least some sense to me at first, especially because it only ever seemed to be me that was saturated, not my bed, my blanket, the floor nor the walls. Did I have some hidden anxiety welling up from deep inside, causing me to get up and open the window while sleeping, standing directly in front of it while the elements pelted me with droplets? That had to be it. It was the only logical thing I could think of at that point. But was it really raining every night? I brushed that thought aside, as I had never lived in this type of area before. Maybe mountain weather just involved a hell of a lot more precipitation than lower elevations. Regardless, I had to know what was going on with me. I looked for a cheap night vision camera and ordered it, with it arriving at my post office box in town within a week. Another week of enduring post-nocturnal moisture and an open window glaring down at me. I made the long drive down and back, taking note of a bunch of new, deep potholes along my path that I should probably fill in later. This was going to be the end of it, I kept telling myself as I set it up pointed directly at my bed, far enough away to catch the window in frame as well. Oh, how I wanted that to be true. I even would have settled for someone breaking in and dumping a bucket of piss on me every night, instead of what I actually discovered. That night, I followed my usual routine of closing the window as tightly as possible, triple-checking it before settling down into bed and soon drifting off. Without fail, the next morning I awoke feeling as though somehow an entire puddle had been dropped on top of me, and this only strengthened my resolve to watch what was happening every single night for the last few months. Hooking up the camera to my computer was easy enough. Accessing the file for last night's recording couldn't have been simpler. Actually watching the entire video from beginning to end, though, I found that nearly impossible. For the first hour or so, nothing was happening. Tossing and turning a bit, but staying in bed right where I should be. A bit after the 2-hour mark, however, there was a curious sound, like glass tinking against itself. 3 times, right in a row. And slowly, my window began opening, seemingly on its own. It would have been better if it actually was on its own. Because not even 30 seconds later, something came through the now open space. At first I couldn't even recognize what it was, but as it wound its way down over the windowsill, I could make it out piece by piece. First fingers, long and slender, tipped with pointed obsidian claws. Followed by a limb of pale, smooth skin leading up into not one, but 2 separate elbows, one further up along the appendage than the other. Finally ending with what I can only assume was a prodigious scaled shoulder, unable to fully squeeze through the gap its spindly protuberance had entered, though not for lack of trying. I could hear the wood creak and groan as it pressed against the window frame with clear desperation. It was an arm. A fucking arm, massive and grotesquely inhuman, was reaching through my window and grasping for my still slumbering shape. The entire length of it seemed to be dripping as it searched. It didn't take long to find me. After all, it had months of practice behind it now. As soon as it laid those clawed fingers on me, I couldn't help it, I looked away. I didn't want to see what it had been doing to my helpless form. I knew enough now, enough that every recess of my being wailed at me to leave now, and never look back. But I didn't leave. And I did look back. It was petting me, caressing me more accurately, dragging those horrible pallid digits from the top of my head all the way down to the bottom of my feet. Long, slow strokes like one would give to a beloved pet that obviously craved attention. Somehow, this was worse to witness than simply doing harm to me. I'd rather it had thrashed me around, or picked me up and yanked me right through the window. Instead I sat there looking on in awful wonder as it lovingly touched every single inch of me, the wetness sloughing off its fingertips onto my clothes and skin. Just as I was about to fast forward through and force myself to watch just how long it stayed there doing that, I caught a sound that still sends a shiver of despair shooting through my entire body even as I sit here writing this. It was a gurgling purr, a longing and mournful cooing emanating from just beyond the shoulder. The worst part is, I recognized it. That terrible night, the one that sent me on this journey into madness, I heard it too. I haven't been entirely forthcoming with you all. I mentioned this briefly before, hoping I wouldn't have to bring it back to the forefront of my mind by recounting all the gory details. I'll still spare you the worst of it, but for full context now I think you should all know. Driving back to my previous house one night, the coastline on one side and a thick forest on the other, I hit something. It was about the size of a golden retriever, so I immediately assumed it was in fact a dog and got out to see just how bad the situation was. What laid in front of my now heavily dented fender, heaving and sputtering with that same purring gurgle, was no dog. God, I wish it had been a dog. It was scaly and pale, much like the arm that had come to haunt me nightly. Its own arms were a fraction of the length of this one, and they sprouted from a thick stocky body not unlike a cross between an alligator and a frog. Just looking at the beastly figure immediately made me want to jump back in my car and speed off, running it completely over in doing so to put it, and me, out of our misery. But I didn't, and now I seriously think I should have. What I did instead was pick it up, carry it into the woods, and lay it down there to suffer and die alone. I don't know why I did that. I guess I thought I was giving it a chance? Or more realistically, I was just shoving it out of the way, out of sight, out of mind, like I do everything else in my life that I just desperately want to ignore. The greenish ichor spewing from its mouth and various wounds that got all over me should have told me it didn't have any sort of chance, anyway. And let me tell you, the stench of that stuff didn't come out for weeks. Sometimes I think I still catch a whiff of it every now and then. That's why I had to leave. I couldn't stand being in that area, knowing what I had done. And to be honest, it just straight up fucking scared me too. The mere existence of that thing obviously implied more like it. I didn't want to be anywhere near there to find out for sure. I think I found out now, anyway. So here I am, sitting alone in my cabin, typing out this plea for help. Not for anyone to come save me, no, I don't want another living soul involved in this mess. I just want a damn good lock for my window. Story 10. We're on vacation up north. Something got inside the house. 4:22 a.m. I'm on the back patio and I haven't moved in what feels like hours. It won't let me leave and it won't go away. Every second that I stand here typing and staring at this thing is agony. It keeps its face pressed against the glass so its large features stretch into this horrible expression. It's inside the house, only a few feet away behind the sliding glass door. I think it came from the woods. I can see past it, past the hallway and the living room. The front door is wide open. Such a fucking idiot. I never lock it back home, but here in the middle of the forest I should have known there are worse things than thieves and raccoons. It's tall, thin and crooked. Its skin is leathered and splotched. There's patchy hair that withers from its scalp in long black strings. Its hands are gripping the glass, shaking. It's shaking now. And it still hasn't looked away from me. And I can say the same. I can't move. My family's still inside, sleeping, but for some reason I can't move. There's a feeling that if I look away from its bulging eyes for too long, if I lose focus, it'll get me. I'm writing this in case this fucking thing doesn't leave when the sun comes up. I don't know how I know, but I'm certain that when morning comes this thing will leave me and my family alone. But if it doesn't? If it doesn't, then God has mercy on us. 4:46 a.m. It's cold. I'm losing feeling in my toes. The snow I'm standing in has melted into my shoes. I didn't think I'd be outside for this long. Just a quick cigarette, and enjoy the northern stars. That was when I saw it. I had just made out the Big Dipper, and in the corner of my eye was this gray line near the top of the sliding glass door. I traced it down, and it was that thing's fucking finger. It was looking at me with its hands in the air like someone surprising a friend at a birthday party. I don't know how long it has been there already. I jumped to my feet, and when I did, it smashed its face into the glass hard enough to crack it near the top. I froze, and it did too. It's huge. My body's telling me that I'm in danger, and the best thing I can do is stay as perfectly still as possible. Just don't move. I remember glancing at the clock before stepping out for the smoke. It was 2:55. I don't know how much longer I can last. The crack in the glass keeps growing. 5:18 a.m. To move. I couldn't bear it anymore. My entire left foot went numb 10 minutes ago. I tried to lift it and give it a shake to bring the blood back, but I lost my balance. I stumbled back a few steps, and when I looked back up it was gone. Gone from the sliding door. It too had retreated a few steps back into the house. Back towards the open front door. Towards the stairs leading to my sleeping family. It raised one of its fingers towards the ceiling. It must have been 6 inches long. The other hand brought another finger to its thin lips. Fish. I understood. I returned to my original spot, and it pushed itself into the glass once again, smearing its face. I can hear the glass cracking. 5:51 a.m. Can't be much longer now. The sun rises late here. I know that. But surely not later than 6. We aren't that far north. Can't be much longer. Can't be much longer. 6:42 a.m. It's taking ages just to type the time. My fingers don't move well. It's getting hard to keep my eyes open. Where is the dawn? It's still as dark as it was at midnight. It's still watching me. 8:30 a.m. My family should be up by now. Back home we always make sure we're moving bright and early. The wind sounds like voices. It hurts, biting into the back of my legs. Is it horrible that I'm comforted by the fact that I won't feel it when my whole body goes numb? I don't think the sun will ever rise. I think this thing knows that too, because it keeps breaking into these violent shaking fits. Laughing. It's laughing at me. I'm laughing too. I can't stop laughing. I just jolted awake. I was asleep on my feet. On my cold black feet. The sliding glass door looks like a kaleidoscope, all the pretty cracks crisscrossing and splintering. I hope it's not getting too cold there. I told them where the extra blankets are, but still I want them to get good sleep. We have a big day of hiking ahead of us. It's smiling at me. It wasn't before, but now I can see layered rows of pearled white shark teeth. As white as the snow. I can see them well because it's still as dark as it was at midnight. But it can't be much longer now. We aren't that far north. Surely it can't be much longer now. Story 11. Blackwood Range. The old logging road, barely a track now, clawed its way up into the Blackwood Range. Inside the beat-up SUV, we were a tangle of limbs and laughter, the scent of pine needles and stale coffee thick in the air. Our annual camping trip was finally here, a much-needed escape from the grind of city life. I was with Sarah, Mark, and Chloe. We found our usual spot, a clearing by the Whispering River, just as the sun began to dip below the jagged peaks. The air instantly cooled, carrying with it the damp, earthy smell of the forest. Tents were pitched, a fire was coaxed to life, and soon, the crackle of burning wood mingled with our easy conversation. As dusk bled into night, the surrounding woods transformed into an oppressive, inky black, punctuated only by the dancing firelight. It was Chloe who noticed it first. A flicker, deep within the treeline, too steady to be an animal, too low to be a star. She dismissed it, but then, as Mark recounted a particularly wild anecdote, a twig snapped in the darkness, closer than it should have been. We all paused, the laughter dying on our lips. I grabbed a flashlight and swept the beam across the surrounding foliage. Nothing. Just the impenetrable wall of trees. Probably a deer, Sarah offered, though her voice lacked conviction. We tried to resume our carefree banter, but an unease had settled over the camp, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Later, as we huddled around the dying embers, the temperature plummeted. Sarah shivered, pulling her jacket tighter. That's when we heard it, a low, guttural whisper, carried on the wind. It wasn't a language I knew, but the sound itself was a violation, an ice-cold caress against my skin. Sleep offered no respite. I awoke with a gasp, drenched in sweat. I dreamt of eyes, vast and ancient, watching me from the depths of a suffocating blackness. The next morning, the mood was somber. The playful teasing had vanished, replaced by a nervous energy. As we packed up our breakfast things, Chloe screamed. Nailed to a tree just beyond our campsite, Precisely where Chloe had seen the first flicker of light was a crude wooden effigy. It was made of twisted branches and bound with what looked like dried sinews. Its head was of featureless stone, but two small, glinting pebbles had been set into it, mimicking eyes. They stared directly at our camp. Panic flared, raw and undeniable. I pulled it down, my hands trembling. "It's just a prank," I insisted, but the words sounded hollow even to me. We decided to leave. The winding logging road, which had seemed so inviting yesterday, now felt like a desperate escape route. As Mark drove, the silence in the SUV was heavy, punctuated only by the crunch of tires on gravel. No one spoke, each lost in their own terrified thoughts. Then the engine sputtered and died. Mark frantically tried to restart it, but the battery was utterly dead. We were miles from civilization, deep in the Blackwood Range, and night was fast approaching. As darkness once again began to consume the forest, we heard it again. The whisper. This time, it was closer, swirling around the vehicle like a venomous mist. "Someone's out there," Sarah whimpered, pressing herself against Chloe. A rhythmic scratching began on the roof of the SUV, like long, brittle fingernails dragging across metal. Then, a low thud against the driver's side window. We all flinched, turning to see a blurry shape pressed against the glass, a vague outline of a face, eyes like charcoal pits. A single, bloody handprint smeared down the glass. I fumbled for my phone, but there was no signal. We were trapped. The scratching intensified, moving around the vehicle, accompanied by soft thumps against the doors. The whisper grew louder, more distinct, forming fragmented, chilling words in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It spoke of old blood, of forgotten rituals, of the forest claiming its own. A bone-chilling shriek erupted from the back of the SUV. We spun around to see Chloe, her eyes wide with terror, pointing to the rear window. A figure, impossibly tall and gaunt, stood just behind us, its form barely discernible in the deepening gloom. It had no discernible features, just an elongated head and limbs that seemed to stretch and contort in the dim light. And those eyes, two pinpricks of malevolent red, fixed on us. The thumping and scratching stopped. A new sound filled the air, a slow, deliberate dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across the ground, circling our vehicle. The whisper began again, no longer fragmented, but a low, monotonous chant, weaving a tapestry of dread around us. The figure outside raised an impossibly long arm, its fingers ending in razor-sharp points. It slowly, deliberately, began to trace patterns in the condensation on the rear window. A symbol emerged, ancient and unsettling, echoing the effigy we'd found. Then, with a sickening crack, the rear window shattered. The blast of cold air hit us like a physical blow. A collective scream tore through the SUV. We scrambled to huddle together, pressing against each other, as the icy breath of the creature filled the vehicle. We could smell it now, the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and something else, something metallic and cloying, like old blood. The chanting outside intensified, a chorus of unseen voices joining the initial whisper. Inside, the shattered window was a gaping maw, and through it, we could see the elongated arms slowly reaching in, its sharp fingers searching. This was no prank. No animal. This was something ancient, something that had waited patiently in the dark heart of the Blackwood Range, and now, it had found us. The last thing I heard before the silence of the forest consumed us completely was Sarah's choked sob, and the whisper, very close now, saying, "Welcome home." I don't know how I survived. I barely remember anything after that. One moment, sheer terror, the next, I was stumbling out of the woods, torn and bloodied, into the first rays of dawn. The others? I don't know what happened to them. The police found the SUV, but it was empty, just shattered glass and that lingering, putrid smell. They called it a bear attack, said I was lucky. But I know what I saw. I know what whispered to us. And every night I still hear the chanting. Story 12. They said the land in Salem was cursed. I should have believed them before I planted anything. I guess this is the only place I can talk about what really happened. No one's going to believe me anyway. And if the feds are still monitoring me, then hi. I'm not insane. Not entirely. It started when I moved to a small rural town near Salem, Massachusetts. Not the touristy side. This was the part they don't put on postcards: endless fields, whispering woods, and a town population that looked at you too long before talking. I got a job working for an organic farming initiative, the kind where you live off the land and help with sustainable agriculture. I love planting things. Dirt calms me. The legends about this place, witches, dead fields, cursed grounds, I didn't give a damn. Stories for old drunks. I was given a small, rundown house with a patch of land in the back. It was early spring. Cold. I started digging a small trench for planting apple trees. About an hour in, I hit something hard. At 3:33 p.m., I uncovered a body. Not a skeleton. Not bones. A fresh corpse. Pale, still soft, eyes open. There were symbols carved into its chest, some kind of twisted runes. I freaked out and called the cops immediately. They showed up, made me sit in the living room, and searched. They found nothing. The hole was empty. No sign of the body, no disturbed dirt, nothing. They left. Gave me a warning about filing a false police report, citing Massachusetts law, Chapter 268, Section 13A. Don't waste public resources again, sir. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I convinced myself I hallucinated. I was tired, jet-lagged, paranoid. I dug the trench again, planted the tree, and covered it up. Then something weird happened. The tree grew fast. But it wasn't the sapling I planted. It was black, almost oily, with sharp, brittle branches. Its roots pushed out of the dirt like fingers trying to escape. It gave off this hum. I yanked it out. Burned it. When I planted another tree in its place, I checked my watch just as I finished covering the roots. 3:33 p.m. The ground sank beneath my shovel. I dug, heart pounding, and there it was. The body. Only this time it looked worse. Older, more decayed. More symbols. And something was stitched into its mouth. I didn't call the police this time. I drove to the sheriff's office in person. Made a scene. Demanded an investigation. They came back. Searched. Again, nothing. I was fined $500 for repeated false emergency reports, and warned that one more call could result in misdemeanor charges, up to 1 year in jail under state law. So I stopped reporting. But I didn't stop looking for them. At 3:33 a.m. or 3:33 p.m., the ground would open, just slightly, and I'd see more corpses. Always in the same place. Always more symbols. Some looked like they were trying to climb out. Sometimes the dirt closed on its own. Then I started dreaming of them. Always the same thing. I'm in the garden. There's something buried inside me. Someone is standing over me, whispering something in Latin. And then they start to dig into my throat. With their fingers. Last week, I woke up bleeding from my mouth. My sheets were covered in dirt. I don't remember what happened after that. They say I was found naked in the middle of the field, screaming in a language no one understood. The sheriff said this was the third time I caused a panic in town. Now I'm in a county jail, awaiting court. They're charging me under Section 268 and disturbing the peace. The police think I've gone nuts. They're wrong. There's something in that ground. Something that remembers. And it wants me to remember, too. I hear it every night in my cell, scratching at the floor beneath my bed. Waiting for 3:33. Story 13. Purple, yellow, and red. I can't believe that you're making me do this, I said to my brother as I caught my breath going up the stairs in my childhood building. Trust me. I've tried everything else. There's no other way. I hadn't been back here since our parents died last year in that freak accident. A gas leak from the stove, with all the windows closed. We had those old-school, double-casement wooden windows. I knew my dad would always leave at least one open, no matter how cold it was, because he liked a little breeze. But that day, all the windows were shut, as if someone wanted them to die. My brother swore it was the building itself. He said it had been cursed since we had that witch living on the second floor many years ago. A cousin of my dad's, before the family knew of her ways and kicked her out, or in other stories, burned her alive to rid the world of her evil. Either way, everyone in our neighborhood swore she cursed the building. Everyone but our family, who denied she was even a witch and claimed their cousin simply lived in another country, but that the apartment was still hers. Every time something freaky happened in our building that either made someone completely leave or get seriously hurt, my father would say it was just a freak accident, and that those happen all the time. Only people with a fluid imagination and lots of time on their hands would think it was something more. People love myths and rumors, he would always say. We reached the second floor, just in front of the door of the infamous apartment. It was just after sunset, and it was starting to get dark. There was no electricity in the building since nobody lived there anymore, and it was becoming harder and harder to see. My brother and I exchanged looks. We had always been terrified of that apartment and would always run past it when we were young. I hadn't thought about it in years since I moved out. I knew the look in his eyes. He wanted us to run up and not spend more time in front of it. He didn't need to say it. Come on, don't be ridiculous. It's just an empty apartment, I said dismissively. Suit yourself, he said. I got closer and put my hand on the door. I didn't know what I was expecting to happen, feel the wood burning maybe? But there was nothing like that. All I felt was how dusty the door was. I put my head against the wood, just to see if I could hear anything, just an intrusive thought. I heard nothing. It was hollow, just the sound of air. But suddenly I heard footsteps. Heavy. Not walking, running toward the door. I pulled my head away instantly and started running up, even though, realistically, I should have been running down and out. Without asking, my brother followed me. We both ran until I stopped on the fourth floor, panting, my hands on my knees, dripping with sweat. What the fuck happened? My brother asked, also gasping. I heard someone running towards the door. Are you sure? I can't be. Nobody lives there. I know what I heard. I'm not crazy, I exclaimed, starting to regret listening to him. Dude, what are we doing here? This is the only way. I told you, I spoke with this guy, Fathy, and he said I need to lift the curse before I can do anything with the building. Otherwise, people will keep leaving or worse, get hurt. You know, Mom and Dad were the last two people adamant about not leaving, and we know what happened to them. Hate to say this, but now that they're gone, I can finally do something with the building they left us. I'll demolish the damn thing and build over it, but we gotta take care of this one thing first. Did you bring the roses like I asked you? Yes, I brought your stupid roses. The right colors? Yes, fucking purple, yellow and red. Why does it have to be these three colors? I can't remember exactly, but the guy said something about purple representing admitting wrongdoing, yellow representing asking for forgiveness, and red representing a sacrifice. A sacrifice? No, just a metaphor. We don't actually have to sacrifice anything. At least that's what he said. I don't know about that, man. Seems sketchy to me, I said, frightened. He grabbed me by both arms aggressively, eyes bulging, teeth clenched. Listen, bro. This is our last chance. This motherfucker cost me a lot of money to tell me what I needed to do. This building is also standing there bleeding money. I'm done with this fucky. I'm done with this witch. I want to get this over with. Let's get this done and get out of here. It's only a small window of time before it gets darker. Then we'd have to come back on a different day. We're already on the fourth floor. Let's get this done, okay? Me, not really sure if I was doing the right thing. Okay. We started going up to the last floor, where we used to live. I was shivering. My emotions were all over the place. I was feeling kind of nostalgic for the place I spent most of my life, but it also felt cold, freezing, like it had been overtaken by something else, something darker, but maybe it was just my imagination. We made it to the last floor. We heard a rhythmic creaking. I stopped in my place and looked at him. No matter how tough he wanted to look, he was my brother. I could read the terror in his eyes. It's just the old baby swing. It's kind of windy today. It's winter after all, he said. I didn't argue. The last floor entrance was kind of open anyway, no ceiling, so that could explain why it was moving. But as soon as we stepped towards the door, the swing stopped, like dead stopped, not even slowing down. How do you explain this? I exclaimed. He didn't answer me. I saw him audibly gulp, and then he started making his way toward the door. He walked sideways in front of the swing, as if trying not to touch whoever or whatever was on it, if so. It started swinging lightly when he came closer. Squeak, squeak, squeak. It went on swinging slowly. It frightened the both of us. He turned around and started rummaging with the key in the keyhole. It took him a second to find the right one, also because he was shaking insanely. Finally, he found the right one. He put it in and I listened as the door unlocked. He opened it slowly. The creak itself, sounding like an old woman's cackle, made me uncomfortable. I hadn't felt like that since I was a little kid. "Bring the damn rose?" he asked. I came closer to him and looked inside my jacket. I took out the first one, the purple. "So what do you need to do?" I asked. He said I need to leave it on the carpet in the middle of the living room, then get out, close the door and wait for a minute. If we open it again and it's gone, then it will be accepted. And if it's still there? Then we need to get the hell out of here as fast as we can. I didn't know which result I was more afraid of. Both were equally terrifying. "Do you want to go first?" he asked. "What? We didn't even talk about me doing anything. I'm just here for support." I screamed at him. All right, but I'll take the first one." He stepped in slowly. I peeked after him. It was pretty dark inside and cold, extremely cold, with a draft of rotten air coming from inside. As if the bodies of my parents were still there. I wondered where that draft was coming from, as I was sure we closed all the windows after we took them out of the apartment and buried them. I watched him quietly walk into the middle of the living room, and there was silence. Not just the silence of an empty apartment, but even the world's noise around us stopped when he stepped in. In shaking steps, he placed the rose on the floor carefully, didn't dare to look around, ran back quickly, and shut the door. He was panting, shaking, sweating, even though it was freezing, eyes bulging. "Now what?" I asked. We wait for a minute." We stood in silence, looking at the watch and peeking our ears at the door, trying to hear anything. There was nothing. Just the loud noise of the moving watch hands. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick. "It's a minute. Let's open up," I said. He turned the knob slowly and peeked from behind the door. "Oh my God. Oh my God," he exclaimed. "What is it?" I asked nervously. "It's gone. The rose is gone." The idea of it sent a shiver down my spine. I shook. I didn't even want to imagine who or what picked it up. "Go put the second one on," I said. "Isn't it your turn now? Come on, dude. Just go. I'll do the last one." "Okay." He stepped in again with the same careful steps and placed the yellow rose on the carpet. Came back as fast as the last time. "Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick. You go check now if it's gone, and then put the last one," he said. I nodded against my will. I opened the door slowly and peeked from the corner. I looked inside. My eyes were blurry, still adjusting to the darkness, as it was getting darker by the minute. I couldn't see anything at all. Forget the rose, I was so nervous I couldn't even see the carpet. "What's taking you so long? Is it there or is it not?" he asked. "Wait a second. My eyes are blurry. I think it's gone." "Oh, thank God," he said. "Go put the last one." "Hey, what if it's a trap?" He stood for a second, not saying anything, thinking about it. "I don't think so. Everything is working like this guy said it would. If it was a trap, something would have happened the second time I went in, right?" Right. "Go on then. Don't overthink it." "I'll go." I stepped in slowly, knees shaking like crazy. Every atom in my body screamed at me to run back. The silence was deafening. I was at the brink of collapsing, heavy breathing, sweating. I kneeled down and felt with my hands if the other rose was there. It wasn't. So I put my right hand in my jacket's inside pocket to pull the last rose. Then I heard a loud flick. I froze. I closed my eyes. Waited for something to happen. I was ready to go. "Dad." I heard a voice calling. A little girl's voice. I opened my eyes slowly. There was a light coming from the back. "Dad, is that you?" the little girl called again. I turned and saw the light coming from the kitchen on the right side of the door, where my brother's silhouette stood, frozen. I couldn't see his face because the light was coming from behind him, but that's not what I was looking at first. I was looking at the floor leading to the kitchen. There was a little girl sleeping on the floor, peeking peeking her head up a little, looking scared. What are you doing here? I came with Mom earlier. She said you'd meet us here. I must have fallen asleep because I was tired. When I woke up, it was very dark and I was scared, she said quietly, her voice breaking. Dad, can you please take me? I'm scared. My parental instincts kicked in. I forgot about everything and immediately stood up, went to her, and picked her up. She wrapped her tiny arms around my neck and buried her face in my chest. She was extremely cold. Oh baby, I'm sorry. You must have been scared to death. I'm still scared, Daddy. I'm here now, baby. Don't be. I turned around slowly to my brother. I was slowly starting to see his features again as my eyes adjusted to the lights. Suddenly, I remembered again why we were here. His eyes were bulging. He was visibly shaking, cold sweat running down his face. What's wrong? I asked. Who are you talking to right now? He asked, frightened. My daughter. Yo, you don't have a daughter. And the door slammed shut. Story 14. They said I'd see my parents again. They were right. The train station was nearly empty, the platform slick with morning dew and the faint scent of rusted metal. I stood alone beneath the overcast sky, the letter trembling slightly in my hand as I read it again, though I had already memorized every word. Dear grandson, good news. The townsfolk found your parents. Return home quickly. Sincerely, Illy. The handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, deliberate strokes that hadn't changed in decades. I folded the paper carefully and tucked it into my coat pocket, my heart pounding with a strange mix of hope and dread. After nearly 20 years of silence, of believing my parents had vanished without a trace, they had been found? The thought seemed impossible. And yet, there I was, boarding a train bound for Straja, the last city before the mountains swallowed the land. The journey took 12 hours, winding through valleys and forests that grew denser and darker the farther the train traveled. I stared out the window, watching the landscape shift from familiar to forgotten, my reflection flickering in the glass like a ghost. That night, I stayed in a modest inn on the edge of Straja, sleep eluding me. At dawn, I unfolded the brittle, hand-drawn map Illy had given me years ago, one I had tried to follow before, always without success. The ink had faded, the paper creased and worn, but the path was still there, a narrow trail leading into the forest, marked only by memory and moss. With the map in hand, I left the edge of Straja behind and stepped onto the trail. It was barely marked, more suggestion than road, winding between tall pines and beech trees whose trunks leaned in like silent sentinels. The morning light filtered through the canopy in pale shafts, catching on the mist that clung low to the ground. Each step felt heavier than the last. The air grew cooler, damp with the scent of moss and stone, and the sounds of the city faded behind me like a dream. The trail began to climb, slowly at first, then more steeply as the forest thickened. Roots twisted across the path like veins, slick with moisture, and the underbrush grew dense and dark. I paused often, not to rest but to listen. There were no birds, no wind, only the soft crunch of my boots and the occasional drip of water from the leaves. The trees here were ancient, their bark furred with lichen, their branches heavy with silence. I passed a crumbling stone marker, half swallowed by ivy, etched with symbols I didn't recognize, but felt I should. The mist thickened as I climbed, curling around my legs and shoulders. Time seemed to stretch. I could no longer tell how long I had been walking. And then, just as the trail seemed to vanish into the undergrowth, the forest opened. The trees parted like curtains, revealing a hollow nestled in the mountainside. There, shrouded in fog and shadow, stood the village of Lunka. Stone cottages with moss-covered roofs clustered around a narrow square, their windows dark and still. Smoke curled lazily from a few chimneys, though I heard no voices, no movement. It was exactly as I remembered, unchanged, untouched, as if preserved in amber. I stood at the edge of the clearing, breath caught in my throat, heart pounding. Whether by luck or fate, I had found my way home. I stepped into the village like I was walking into a dream. The mist curled around my legs as I crossed the square, muffling the sound of my footsteps. The cottages stood in quiet formation, their stone walls slick with moisture, roofs sagging beneath thick layers of moss. Wooden shutters hung slightly askew, and the windows reflected only gray sky. Smoke drifted from a few chimneys, but the air was still, too still. Then a voice broke the silence. "Welcome back," said Ionel, standing outside the butcher's shop, cleaver in hand. He looked exactly as I remembered, broad-shouldered, apron-stained, face unchanged by time. Not a wrinkle more. Not a hair out of place. Others appeared as I moved through the square. Mircea, the farmer, hauling a sack of grain with the same slow rhythm. The Dragon family, herding goats across the cobblestones, the children waving shyly. Every face was familiar. Every gesture preserved. They greeted me warmly, kindly. But none of them said my name. I tried to ask about my parents, about the letter, but the answers were always the same, gentle, vague, and evasive. "They're being looked after," someone said. "You'll see them soon," said another. No one offered more than that. After a while, I stopped asking. With nothing else to do, I made my way toward my grandfather's house. The path was overgrown but unmistakable. The leaning pines still stood watch over the roof. The door creaked open before I could knock. Illy stood in the doorway, thinner than I remembered, but his eyes were sharp, his smile tight. "You made it," he said, pulling me into a brief, firm hug. "I wasn't sure you would." Inside, the house was preserved like a memory. Dustless. Still, my childhood room waited for me, untouched, same desk, same faded quilt, same faint scent of pine and old paper. It was as if I had never left. At lunch, Illy served a thick, moss-colored stew. I hesitated, then took a bite. The taste was earthy, familiar, strangely comforting. He watched me eat, saying little. When I asked about my parents, Illy's gaze drifted to the window. "They're with Serena," he said. "The healer. She's been taking care of them. You'll see them soon." That night, the village was silent. I wandered the narrow paths, past shuttered windows and flickering lanterns. The mist had thickened, and the air was heavy with the scent of damp wood and something else, something sweet and earthy. I paused at the old well in the square. A memory surfaced, my mother's voice, warning me not to look too deep. "Things live in the dark," she had whispered once, her hand tight around mine. Back in my room, I lay awake, listening. The silence pressed in from all sides. No crickets. No wind. Just the slow, rhythmic creak of the house settling into the earth. And then, just before sleep took me, I heard it, a faint rustling beneath the floorboards, like roots shifting in the soil. I must have drifted off, because the next thing I remember was the feeling of damp earth pressing against my skin. In the dream, I was lying beneath the forest floor. Not buried, just beneath, as if the soil had grown around me. I could see the roots above me, tangled and pulsing faintly with light, like veins beneath translucent skin. They moved slowly, rhythmically, as though breathing. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't anything. I felt calm. Somewhere in the distance, I heard voices, not speaking exactly, but murmuring in a language I didn't know and somehow understood. They weren't calling me. They were remembering me. I reached up, and the roots reached down. When I woke, my hands were clenched around the bedsheets, damp with sweat. The morning light was pale and cold, filtering through the curtains like mist. I sat up slowly, heart pounding, the dream still clinging to me like fog. The rustling was gone. But the silence remained. Over the next few days, I wandered the village, trying to shake the feeling that something was watching me. The stillness that had once felt peaceful now unsettled me. The villagers moved with the same quiet rhythm, their smiles unchanged, their eyes just a little too distant. I asked again about my parents. Illy deflected as always. "They're resting," he said, not meeting my eyes. "You'll see them soon." His tone was gentle but final, like a door quietly closing. I stopped asking. But the silence only made the questions louder. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was being kept from me. A few nights later, over dinner, Illy mentioned it casually, as if it were nothing. "I'll be out late tonight," he said, ladling another spoonful of stew into my bowl. "Serena's been tending the garden by moonlight. Says the moss grows better that way." I nodded, pretending not to care. But something in his voice, too light, too rehearsed, stuck with me. That night, I waited until the house was quiet. I watched from the upstairs window as Illy stepped into the mist, lantern in hand, and made his way down the path toward the edge of the village. I counted to 50, then followed. The air was colder than before, the mist thicker. My footsteps were nearly silent on the moss-covered ground. I kept my distance, ducking behind trees and fences, heart pounding with every step. At the far end of Lunka, Illy reached Serina's house and opened the door like it belonged to him. No hesitation. No knock. Just the soft creak of old hinges as he stepped inside and quietly shut it behind him. I crouched low behind a thicket of ferns across the path, breath held. The mist had thickened here, curling around the garden like a veil. The house stood in stillness, no candlelight in the windows, no voices, no movement. Just silence. I waited. A minute passed. Then another. No footsteps. No conversation. Not even the sound of Illy moving inside. It was as if the house had swallowed him whole. Right beside the house was an unfenced garden, wild and overgrown. The mist hung low over the ground, curling around the edges of moss-covered stones and pale, flowering fungi that glowed faintly in the moonlight. At first, I thought they were statues. Two figures stood near the center of the garden, side by side, motionless. They were tall, human-shaped, and dressed in clothing that looked oddly familiar. I squinted through the haze, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The coat, dark wool, frayed at the cuffs. The shawl, white, with a faded red floral pattern. My eyes widened. I knew those clothes. I hadn't seen them in decades, but I remembered them clearly. My father's coat. My mother's shawl. I stepped closer, heart thudding. The figures were too still. Their posture was perfect, shoulders gently sloped, hands folded just so. Like they had been arranged. Preserved. Then I saw their skin. It was smooth. Too smooth. Not like flesh, but something else, something grown. The texture looked soft and pale, almost waxy, with faint green veins running just beneath the surface. My stomach turned. And their faces were incomplete. Where their eyes should have been, there were only dark recesses. At first glance, they looked hollow, like empty sockets carved into smooth, pale skin. But as I leaned in, I saw movement. Not emptiness. Growth. Moss filled the voids, thick and dark, threaded with delicate filaments that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. It wasn't just growing there, it was nesting, layered and dense, like something cultivated. Tiny tendrils curled outward from the sockets, twitching slightly, as if tasting the air. Then, as I stared, the moss shifted. Not with the breeze, there was none, but with intention. The filaments stirred, recoiled, then slowly unfurled again. It was as though the moss itself was aware of me, watching me without eyes. I stumbled back, a gasp caught in my throat. My foot snapped a twig. A light flickered in the window. Illy appeared behind the glass, his face half lit by a lantern. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look angry. He just looked at me. Right into me. I ran. Branches clawed at my coat as I tore through the mist, back toward the house. My thoughts were a blur. Memories, questions, panic. I didn't stop until I reached the front door, slammed it shut behind me, and leaned against it, chest heaving. I had to leave. I grabbed my bag from the bedroom, shoved in what little I had brought, and turned to go. My hand was on the doorknob when I heard it. Footsteps on the porch. I opened the door. They were waiting. Doran and Anka. My parents. Standing in the pale light, smiling. Their faces were complete now. The mossy hollows had been filled, eyes that looked almost human, but not quite. Too still. Too green. Illy stood behind them, his expression unreadable. "We've missed you," my parents said, in perfect unison. "You're almost ready." I slammed the door shut. My parents' voices still echoed in my ears, soft, synchronized, wrong. I backed away from the threshold, heart pounding, the image of their too still eyes seared into my mind. Illy hadn't said a word. He didn't need to. I bolted the door and stumbled down the hallway, pacing in tight, frantic circles. I had to leave. I had to get out of Lunka before whatever had taken them came for me too. This time, I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my bag. No second guessing, no looking back. I didn't even bother with the map. I knew the trail. I walked it just days ago. Before slipping out the back door, I snatched a kitchen knife. Just in case. The village was quiet, but not empty. I could feel it. Eyes in the mist. Shapes that didn't move quite right. I reached the edge of the square, heart hammering, only to stop cold. They were all there. Everyone. Blocking the path. Everyone except the ones pretending to be my parents, and Illy. Footsteps echoed behind me. I turned. They were coming. I pulled out the knife and held it steady, warning them to stay back. But no one flinched. Anka, Doran, and Illy stopped just a few feet in front of me. Don't leave, Anka said softly. Stay with us. You'll be one of us soon. What do you mean? I asked, my voice trembling. You'll find out soon enough, Doran replied, his tone calm, too calm. I don't want to. I shouted. I just want to leave. Don't try to stop me. Or I'll hurt you. There's no need for violence, Anka said gently. Come, give your mother a hug. Everything will be okay. She stepped forward, arms outstretched, as if to embrace me. I raised the knife and slashed her hand. Her thumb fell to the ground. She didn't react. Her expression didn't change. That same cold smile remained frozen on her face. Where her thumb had been, there was no blood, only moss, dense and dark, growing from within. Behind me, the crowd shifted. An opening had formed. You may leave, Anka said. You're not ready yet. But soon you will be. I backed away slowly, eyes darting between the figures. Their gazes never left me. When I was far enough, I turned and ran, straight into the misty trail I knew so well, not daring to look back. The mist swallowed me whole. Branches clawed at my arms as I tore through the underbrush, the trail barely visible beneath the shifting fog. My lungs burned, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Behind me, the silence of Lunka pressed in like a weight, unnatural and absolute. I didn't dare look back. The forest thickened, the trees older here, twisted, gnarled, watching. I knew this path. I had walked it just days ago. Now every step felt unfamiliar, foreign. The knife trembled in my grip. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had lost all meaning. But then, through the thinning mist, I saw it. A wooden signpost, half-rotted and leaning, pointing toward Straja. Relief surged through me, sharp, overwhelming. I was close. The trees began to thin, the air lightening with every step. I stumbled out of the forest and onto a gravel road. In the distance, lights flickered, warm, steady, human. Straja. I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath, the knife still clenched in my hand. I was out. I made it. I dropped the blade and forced myself to my feet, heading straight for the inn I had stayed at before. The staff looked up in alarm as I entered, my clothes torn, my skin scratched and streaked with moss and dirt. What happened to you? One of them asked, eyes wide. Hiking accident, I said quickly. I just need to rest. They didn't press further. A room was prepared and I was left alone. The room was quiet, but sleep didn't come easily. Even with the door locked and the curtains drawn, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me. Not in the literal sense. There were no footsteps, no shadows at the window. Just a presence. A weight. As if the forest hadn't let me go completely. I lay still for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the radiator and the occasional creak of the old inn settling. When I finally drifted off, my dreams were thick and slow. I wandered through endless woods, the ground soft beneath my feet, the air damp and sweet. I could feel something pulsing beneath the soil, like breath. I woke up with dirt under my nails. The days passed in a blur. I stayed inside mostly, claiming exhaustion. The innkeeper brought me food, asked polite questions I barely answered. I told myself I was recovering, that I just needed time. But I found myself drawn to the darker corners of the city. The shaded alley behind the bakery. The mossy stone wall near the church. I lingered there longer than I meant to, breathing in the damp, earthy air. I stopped answering calls. The voices on the other end felt distant, like echoes from a life I'd already left behind. On the 5th day, I packed my bag. At the train station, the sky was overcast, the platform nearly empty. I stood alone, watching the tracks disappear into the trees. The wind stirred the leaves, and for a moment, I thought I heard something soft, like movement beneath the ground. Then a whisper. Faint. Familiar. Come home. I closed my eyes. My fingers curled into fists. Come home. The train's horn cut through the air. I stepped forward. No, I said under my breath. Not this time. The doors opened. I boarded without looking back. As the train pulled away, the forest receded into mist. I sat by the window, watching the trees blur into shadow, the sounds still faint in the back of my mind. But I kept going. Story 15. I discovered a book in my library that seems to predict the deaths of my friends and family. Every single one of them is coming to pass. It was a rainy Saturday morning, and I could hear the rain tapping against my window. I looked up from my laptop and let out a soft sigh. The sound was somewhat annoying, yet also oddly soothing, and I thought it might help me focus on the history essay I needed to finish for school. As I kept typing away on my laptop, I suddenly heard yelling and shouting. I paused, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, and groaned quietly to myself. Not again. I got up from my bed and walked out of my room, heading down the hall and downstairs, where the yelling grew louder. As I turned the corner, I spotted my mom and older brother Mark in the living room, arguing about something. Mom, I already told you I'm sorry. I should have called to let you know I'd be home late. I didn't realize that party would go on until 1 in the morning. And I've already told you that I don't like you or your brother being out that late. Something terrible could have happened to you. For heaven's sake, you could have been killed or kidnapped, Marcus. Mom and Mark continued their argument, clearly oblivious to my presence. I sighed softly, contemplating whether to just turn around and let them sort it out. Even though I was 25 and Mark was 27, Mom still treated us like children. She insisted we stay with her until we were both 30, which infuriated us. I felt a surge of frustration rising within me, and I cleared my throat as loudly as I could, causing Mom and Mark to stop arguing. They both turned to look at me. Oh my goodness, Daniel. I'm so sorry. Did we interrupt your studying? Mom asked, sounding genuinely concerned. I've been attempting to study for more than an hour, but I can't concentrate with you two bickering like children. Mark's face flushed a deep red. I could tell he was embarrassed about the situation, yet he was still angry with Mom and wouldn't cease his argument until he had expressed everything he wanted to say. We're sorry, sweetheart. I'm just trying to explain to your brother that staying out late isn't wise, Mom said. I've always disliked that particular trait of Mom's. She's such a worrywart, if that's the right term, because she frets over everything, even the most trivial matters. You know what? I'll just head to the library. Maybe I can finish my essay there, and hopefully, there won't be anyone trying to tear each other apart. I nearly yelled the last part out of frustration as I turned and stormed back upstairs to my room to grab my things. As I shoved my laptop and notebook into my bag, I muttered under my breath about the constant fighting and how I felt treated like a child. Just as I was about to leave, I heard a knock on my bedroom door. I turned to see Mark leaning against the doorframe. I hadn't even noticed him come up behind me. Let me guess, Mom sent you up here to stop me from heading to the library, I remarked, glancing at him. Yep, she believes it's a terrible idea for you to go outside in this rainstorm because you might get sick or even struck by lightning, which is ridiculous, but she wouldn't listen when I told her that. I rolled my eyes and plopped down on my bed, slipping on my shoes and ensuring the straps were snug but not so tight that they were cutting into my feet. Honestly, I don't care what the worrywart or you think. I'm going to the library to finish my darn history essay without having to listen to another argument from either of you. Now, if you could do me a favor and tell Mom I'll be back before dinner, that would be great, I retorted. Before my brother could respond, I got up, tossed my bag over my shoulder, and pushed past him, making my way downstairs to the main part of the house. Mom was there, clearly waiting for me. I raised my hand to signal that I didn't want to hear her lecture and assured her I'd be home by dinner before stepping out onto the porch. The only sounds I could hear were the rain and the rumbling thunder. I let out a soft sigh, double-checking that my bag was securely closed, then pulled up my hoodie and set off toward the city library. Who would have thought a library would be open on a weekend? After a few minutes of walking along the rain-soaked street, feeling the droplets on my head and back, I found myself in front of the library, a smile creeping onto my face. The library always brought me joy. There was something magical about the aroma of aged paper and the soft murmurs of books that captivated me. As I entered the library, I greeted the woman at the front desk. She returned my greeting with a smile, though I could sense she wasn't thrilled to see me looking so drenched. I located a spot to settle down, and a few minutes later, my belongings were spread out on the desk as I began working on my essay. In fact, my laptop remained tucked away in my bag while I attempted to proofread my notes before transferring them. I sighed quietly, frustrated that nothing seemed to make sense, and realized I needed some assistance. I got up and approached the front desk, inquiring if there were any history encyclopedias available that could aid me with my school essay. She informed me that all the history encyclopedias were located in the back corner of the library and advised me to be cautious while I was there since some of those books were quite ancient. I nodded in agreement and made my way to the back corner. Upon arrival, I began to sift through the aisles, but all the books appeared either dull or I was certain they wouldn't be of any assistance to me. Before long, I turned a corner and stumbled upon a section I had never seen before. It looked rather intimidating as the overhead light was flickering and swaying back and forth. I noticed a layer of dust on the shelf, and a few bugs scurried out from the shadows, rushing past me. I glanced at all the encyclopedias and couldn't help but smile. Perhaps one of these could be useful to me, I thought, grinning. I began to pull encyclopedias off the shelf, examining their covers. Some I had read previously, while others were quite old, likely published when my mom was my age. As I pushed one encyclopedia aside, something heavy tumbled down onto my foot, causing me to cry out in pain. I quickly slapped a hand over my mouth, not wanting to disrupt the tranquility. I looked down and saw a thick, brown book lying on the ground. I bent down to pick it up and noticed it lacked any library codes or markings indicating ownership. However, I soon realized how worn and tattered it was. The spine was cracked. I dusted off the cover and read the title, which sent a shiver down my spine. Prophetic Pages. I opened the book and began flipping through the pages, each one yellowed with age and filled with handwritten notes and strange symbols that seemed to dance before my eyes. As I continued to flip through the pages, I discovered that each one contained a detailed entry about the life and death of an individual. It struck me that the names were eerily familiar. They were all people I knew, friends, family, acquaintances. I was in disbelief over what I was holding. When I turned to the next page, I nearly dropped the book on my feet once more. Timothy Green, age 23, dies in a car accident on April 15, 2023. This page was dedicated to my childhood best friend, Timothy, or Tim as I called him. April 15th was tomorrow, and I could feel my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I closed the book, trying to convince myself that this was just a cruel joke. I glanced around the library, half expecting someone to jump out and shout, "Got you!" But the aisles were empty. The only sounds were the rain tapping against the nearby window and my heavy breathing. I came to the realization that I had to hurry home to call Tim and alert him about what was going to happen. I tucked the strange book under my arm and dashed back to the desk where my belongings were. A few minutes later, I found myself sprinting down the street as fast as a guy who mainly plays video games and practices the trumpet can manage. I began to ponder a multitude of thoughts. Was any of this real? Was the book some sort of cursed object that the library had been concealing? Upon arriving home, I rushed past Mark and Mom, who were in the kitchen preparing dinner. Thankfully, I didn't hear them arguing, but I didn't have the luxury of time to deal with that right now. Once I reached my room, I tossed my bag and the Prophetic Pages book onto my desk, then grabbed my phone from the nightstand. Without delay, I dialed Tim's number, my fingers trembling as the phone rang and rang. Just when I thought he wouldn't pick up, I heard his voice on the other end. "Dude, you need to listen to me. This is really important." Are you planning to go out tonight? I asked him. Timothy excitedly explained that he was actually going to see a new horror movie that had just been released and suggested I join him if I was done being Mr. History. I took a deep breath and pleaded with him to stay home, urging him not to drive anywhere and to just remain safe at home. Tim immediately laughed, teasing me about turning into my mother. I was on the verge of telling him about the peculiar book I discovered at the library, but I knew he wouldn't believe me. Just then, I heard Mom calling my name, so I told Tim I had to go, and he hung up. I let out a soft sigh before glancing down at the prophetic pages book. Deep down, I feared it might already be too late for my childhood best friend. I heard Mom calling my name again, so I set my phone back on the nightstand. I then walked out of my room and saw Mom standing at the foot of the stairs. She informed me that dinner was ready and that she had been calling for me for 2 minutes, urging me to come downstairs before my food got cold. At the table, I sat there pushing my peas around my plate with a fork while Mom and Mark were engaged in conversation, but I was focused on them. My mind was occupied with thoughts of the dangerous book from the library, Tim's disbelief, and the looming possibility of losing my best friend, either tomorrow or maybe even tonight. "Hey little bro, what's up with you?" Mark inquired. I jumped in my seat, nearly falling out, but I managed to keep my composure because I knew if I hit the ground, Mom would treat me like a little baby. "Oh, I'm just pondering my history essay. I found some intriguing information at the library, and I think it will help me score a good grade." I couldn't share the details about the so-called death book because neither of them would believe me, especially since Tim never believed me when I warned him about his fate. After dinner, I headed back to my room, sat on the bed, grabbed the book, and flipped to the page detailing Tim's death. I kept staring at it, wondering if it was real or if I could tear the page out and somehow prevent it from happening, like some sort of paradox. But then I remembered that this book was indeed from the library, and I had borrowed it, yet it lacked any library barcodes or scanning tags, so perhaps it didn't actually belong to the library. I let out a soft sigh before placing the book on my nightstand, getting ready for bed, and soon I was lying in the dark bedroom, thinking about Tim and the terrible car accident that awaited him on April 15th. The next morning as I woke up, sunlight streamed through my window. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and yawned. Instantly, I turned around, glancing at my phone, my thoughts immediately drifting to Tim. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I quickly grabbed my phone and texted Tim, checking if he was all right and if he had enjoyed the movie. I anticipated a swift response, but there was nothing. Throughout the day, I kept waiting for Tim to either call or text me, but still, no reply came. Panic began to creep in, and I muttered in frustration under my breath. I made the decision to call Tim's home phone. However, instead of him picking up, it was his mother. When I inquired about Timothy's whereabouts, I heard her gasp in horror. She informed me that Tim had been involved in a car accident while driving to the grocery store, and the paramedics said he didn't survive. At that moment, I felt my legs buckle beneath me. I leaned against the wall, sliding down until I collapsed onto the floor. The prophetic pages had spoken the truth, and it had come to pass. The book had foretold his death, and despite my efforts, I couldn't save my best friend from dying. The very next day, I found myself back at the library, enveloped in a fog of sorrow and disbelief, desperate to comprehend what had just transpired. I settled into the same desk as before, retrieving the book from my bag, gazing at it before I began to leaf through the yellowed pages once more. Each page contained a meticulous account of the life and death of various individuals. Some were familiar to me, while others were not. Yet, each entry represented a friend or family member who would meet their end in unique circumstances, all described in vivid detail. As I continued to turn the pages, I suddenly halted on one that sent a chill through my hands, almost compelling me to hurl the book across the room. Jessica Carter, age 25, dies from an aneurysm on April 16, 2023. At that moment, I understood that this page detailed the death of my girlfriend, Jessica. A shiver coursed through me as I recalled the last time I saw Jessica. We were at the coffee shop, sharing laughter over something silly. Without hesitation, I jumped up, stuffed the book into my bag, and fished my phone out of my pocket to dial Jessica's number. "Hey Daniel, what's up? I'm at work right now," her voice came through. "Listen, Whatever you're doing, you need to stop or head home. You're in danger. I rushed to explain about the book I discovered in the library, detailing how it revealed the deaths of all my friends and family, including her. I then told her I found Tim's name in the book, and that he died in a car accident yesterday, just as the book predicted for that exact date. Whoa, Daniel, I think you've been watching too many horror movies. But when you get to the restaurant, at least bring me that so-called mystical book you have, Jessica said before hanging up. I felt an urge to scream into the emptiness. I urged my feet to run, wishing I had brought my car or something quicker than my clumsy feet. When I finally reached the restaurant, I doubled over, gasping for breath. As I looked up, I saw a crowd gathered around the entrance, and confusion washed over me. Were they having a sale, or was there a fight going on? I was indifferent to the commotion. My only focus was finding Jessica to show her the book. I squeezed through the throng and entered the restaurant, where I noticed paramedics and medical personnel, along with an area cordoned off by barriers. I couldn't see what was happening due to another crowd blocking my view, so I tapped an older man on the shoulder. He turned to me, concern etched on his face. "Sir, what's going on?" "One of the workers just collapsed, and the paramedics think she's dead," he replied. The moment he mentioned she, my heart plummeted. I pushed through the crowd, and there on the ground, eyes closed and lifeless, lay Jessica. "No, Jessica!" I yelled, my voice echoing in the chaos. Instantly, the paramedics and medical staff turned to me. One approached and asked if I knew her. I told her I was Jessica's boyfriend, that I had just spoken to her on the phone moments ago, urging her to leave work because it wasn't safe. I was rambling, overwhelmed, and I stopped when the paramedic placed her hands on my shoulders. "Young man, it's okay. You should know what happened. Your girlfriend has died from an aneurysm, and there was nothing we could do to save her." "I'm so sorry," the paramedic said. The book felt like a dark oracle, revealing its grim secrets, and I thought about showing it to this woman. But if I did, she would likely bombard me with questions I couldn't answer. So, I thanked her and, without another word, pushed past everyone and exited the restaurant, furious that this cursed book had claimed yet another person I loved. Weeks later, the unsettling pattern persisted. Each page revealed the demise of a victim who was more familiar to me than Jessica. I had become a captive of the book, unable to resist the allure of its sinister knowledge. It felt as if it understood my sorrow, with the ink appearing darker on every page. Then, I stumbled upon a page that shattered my heart into countless fragments upon seeing the name of the individual. Marcus Roberts, age 27, died of a heart attack on April 30th, 2023. I realized that was tonight once again, and I leaped out of bed, rushing to my brother's room, where I found him lacing up his shoes. "Dude, where are you going? It's almost 9 o'clock at night." "Can't sleep. Thinking about going for a late-night run. Be back soon." I pleaded with him not to venture outside tonight, insisting it was too perilous. Mark chuckled, saying I was becoming like Mom, but I was just terrified of losing my brother. After an hour had passed, I found myself in the kitchen assisting Mom in preparing her renowned double chocolate chip cookies, and I could see that she appeared anxious about something. I inquired about what was troubling her, and she revealed that Mark had not returned from his walk, nor had he sent her a message as he had promised to do when he was on his way back home. I sensed what was about to unfold, and I knew I had to intervene. I looked at Mom and told her I needed to take care of something urgent, to which she simply nodded in agreement. Without another word, I quickly put on my jacket and shoes, then dashed out of the house. My breath came in quick, uneven gasps as I sprinted toward the park, Mark's favorite place to walk. As I neared the park, I spotted a figure lurking in the shadows, and my heart raced in my chest. When I turned the corner, I found him lying on the ground, clutching his chest. "Mark!" I yelled. I hurried to my brother, but deep down, I already knew it was too late for him. That dreadful book had taken yet another victim, and this time, it was my brother. I was descending into madness. First, my 2 friends were taken from me, and then my brother. The loss of my loved ones was a heavy burden on my emotions. That's when an idea struck me. I seized the book and made my way back to the library one last time, desperate for answers. The main librarian, an elderly woman, looked up at me with her piercing green eyes. "What is this book? Why is it causing all of this?" I slammed the prophetic pages onto the desk. Initially, the lady remained silent, but as she took the book and examined it, her expression shifted, and she regarded me with a serious look. "Young man, where did you come across this book?" "I was here last time searching for history encyclopedias when this book fell off the shelf and landed on my foot. But you still haven't answered my question. What is this book?" "That's the prophetic pages. It has always existed, young man. It chronicles the lives that are intertwined with yours and predicts not only death but also the weight of the choices and paths we take," the librarian clarified. "This isn't a choice, it's a curse." I shouted in frustration. "Perhaps it is, or perhaps it isn't. But understand this, that book only reveals what is already destined. It's not the cause but a reflection of the choices you've made and the connections you've established," she replied. I took a step back, my mind racing. Had I somehow cursed all those deaths of my loved ones without realizing it? Was I in some way accountable for the choices they made or the paths they chose? "Can I change this? Is there any way to stop it?" I inquired. "The only way to put an end to this situation is to cut off the connections, but it comes at a cost, young man." Her words seemed to penetrate deep within me, and without uttering a single word, I turned away from the desk, leaving my book behind in the library. I came to the realization that I had to create distance from everyone I cared about. I needed to sever ties with them, even though it felt like a betrayal. It was the only way to protect them all. In the following weeks, I dedicated my days and nights to solitude. Whenever I encountered someone I recognized, I would steer clear of them, and I ignored their calls and messages. This was torturous, yet it brought a sense of relief as I observed that no one around me was perishing, and I felt assured that my loved ones were safe. Then one day, as I went to my bedroom to indulge in some video games, I discovered the Prophetic Pages book lying on my bed, and I felt as if I could melt into a puddle. I hurried over to it, picked it up, and as I examined the cover, my hands trembled while I opened the book and flipped straight to the last page. To my surprise, it was entirely blank, leaving me puzzled. Recalling what the librarian had said, I touched the paper and watched in amazement as the information began to materialize before my eyes. When I saw the name of the next person destined to die, my jaw dropped in disbelief. Daniel Roberts, 25 years old, passed away from loneliness on May 15, 2023. The book slipped from my grasp. That date was tomorrow. I couldn't fathom it. I felt as if I might either vomit or weep like a child. The realization hit me like a massive wave. I had been so focused on saving my friends and loved ones that I had unwittingly sealed my own doom. I needed to cut myself off entirely from everyone, even my mother, who was thankfully still alive. But I was destined to become a mere ghost. A mere shadow of who I used to be. This book had twisted my intentions, transforming my wish to protect into a sentence of death. The following day, I found myself sitting alone on the floor of my bedroom, feeling the darkness creeping in, coiling around me like a serpent. I reminisced about my friends and brothers, recalling the laughter and memories we had created together. It dawned on me that I had forsaken them all, and in doing so, I had condemned myself. Mom attempted to coax me out of my room, but nothing she said had any effect. As night descended, I sensed the air becoming thick and oppressive. Suddenly, I heard whispers, likely from that dreadful book, echoing in my mind, the pages shifting as if they were alive. I let out a soft sigh, rising to my feet and moving to my nightstand where the prophetic pages lay. I began flipping through the book, only to find it completely blank, and I realized I was about to join them. I shut the book and hurled it to the ground, confronting the horrifying truth. I had become a prisoner of my own decisions, a victim of fate. As the sudden darkness enveloped me, I grasped the meaning of it all. The real terror did not stem from the foretold deaths but from the isolation I had chosen to accept. But now it was too late. I had become a new edition of the prophetic pages, destined for a solitary conclusion. As I sank into the shadows, I finally understood how to escape the curse of the prophetic pages.